Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast, your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. I'm Robert Winfrey. I am your host for the show. It is currently Sunday, October 27th, 2019. I should probably do that every week, just announce the date that we're recording so none of this comes off as deeply anachronistic. Tonight we will be reviewing yesterday's event, UFC on ESPN Plus 20. The UFC was back in Singapore, and you know what? I mentioned last week that was a decent enough card on paper, and it turned out, pretty solid, all things considered. Some good, some bad, some hilariously bad. We'll get into all of it. Also on the docket this evening, next week, oh boy, UFC 244, baby. I am deeply excited for that card. We'll have a full preview. Between those discussing those two events, there was a dust up this last week featuring Nat Diaz and the organization of USADA, a little bit of the UFC. So we're going to have to talk about that because we can just talk a little bit about what a giant fail in many respects USADA in the UFC has been, but we'll see. Anyway, we'll talk a little bit about a bunch of that stuff. UFC 245 got a couple of fights. One of them's odd, one of them's great. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Some fights fell through this week. Junior Dos Santos had a pretty gnarly staph infection. In fact, there's a picture of him in the hospital with the hole in his leg. That's what happens when you do Dancing with the Stars. Just less sanitary than BJJ mats. Again, just any other news that's kind of come out over the last week. So you guys know the drill by now. Here with me is my usual partner in crime. He is currently watching and eagerly anticipating another victory for the Houston Astros in the current World Series. Jeff Harris. How you doing, Jeff?
2-2. Let's go Astros. Let's get it done. The other thing I will get done tonight, I'm going to make Robert Winfrey give Beneil Dariush his due.
I am always happy to give Beneil Dariush his due.
Never. You and Pat Mullen have both trashed him multiple times.
I have not trashed him. I said I think he's peaked, which is probably still a somewhat accurate statement. That doesn't mean he's not good.
Inaccurate.
But he runs over Frank Camacho and suddenly he's a top 15 guy again?
Erroneous. People have made it into the rankings on less.
That's true. That's true. The rankings suck.
Okay.
I'm not arguing that. Again, look, I said last week if we ranked out to 20, I'd probably have Dariush in my top 20.
He deserves to be higher.
I'm gonna have to bring up both the rankings and the roster list and see if I agree with that in a second or two, but we'll get to it. Now, I was a big supporter of Dariush going into what was that loss because it wasn't the Hernandez loss was a bad one. But I think I picked him in the Barboza fight actually. And then he had such a great first round followed by getting knocked out, and it's lightweight.
Barboza is a perennial top 10 competitor.
And then he fought to a draw with Evan Dunham that he was lucky to get.
Look, Evan Dunham's not a world beater, but he's had his moments in the UFC as well.
And then he got knocked. He was still ranked at that point, actually. Then he gets knocked out by Hernandez, and that's kind of that.
Dunham, whether you like it or not, Dunham was on a 4-fight winning streak at the time, coming off consecutive wins over Ross Pearson, Joe Lozon, and Rick Glenn. None of those guys are not elite competition, but those guys are tough, longtime veterans who have either had long runs in MMA with considerable win-loss records in MMA or the UFC.
So a natural featherweight fighting up a weight class on short notice and two washed guys. Look, Lozon was washed at that point, as was Pearson.
Erroneous.
Look, the fact that he came back in this one sense is not...
That was Rick Glenn's UFC debut.
Yeah, he took it on short notice, and he's a natural featherweight.
All right, well, maybe he thought it was his natural weight.
No, he took it on short notice, and we see that all the time with guys who will take a short notice fight in the wrong weight class.
He was considered one of the top fighters of the World Series of Fighting at the time. We'll get into it.
Yeah. He was a former champion in World Series of Fighting, wasn't
exactly.
he? Yeah. I don't have anything against Glenn.
I think you're underselling Beneil, and we'll get into it.
Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and jump in with the main event then, because this was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun with this fight.
I said on social media that fight was better than it had any right to be when you consider all the metrics, right?
Yeah, in a lot. Well, the striking was more engaging than I think we all expected. The grappling was everything we hoped it was.
Right.
Damian Maia submits Ben Askren with a rear naked choke, 354 of the third round.
41-year-old Damian Maia still getting it done.
Yeah, Damian Maia, man. I almost don't know what to say about that guy. He's equal parts infuriating and incredible.
How did you score that fight before it was the third round, but how were you scoring the fight?
I was around a piece going into the third.
Okay.
So yeah, this fight, we saw the return of K1 ready Damian Maia. Which is just a joke. But Damian Maia, a lot of people
like Maia he's not an elite striker, but I think I even said last week his striking has developed to an adequate level.
Yeah, he's got, I think we all mentioned, he's got better hands than Askren does.
Right.
He was throwing a good straight left. They did a little bit of grappling in that first round, not a lot. They were both clearly very wary of it. Second round, like when this fight was on the feet, it was just kind of a drunken bar fight, but the kind that's, somewhat amusing to watch.
Askren, for all his skill, has never really developed his striking all that much as Maia has.
Askren's very much kind of known which side his bread is buttered on.
And, not that he should stand and bang, but I feel like even if you're a wrestler, a really good wrestler, you should be able, if you can't, what if your wrestling gets taken away? You need to be able to use those tools, Yeah,
you need the plan B and C. So they engaged in some of that. The big thing in the second round was there was some great grappling. Askren hit a couple of takedowns. Maia hit a beautiful omoplata sweep into top position. Very nearly gets Askren's. I mean, seriously, that triangle to omoplata to sweep was a thing of beauty.
We rarely see, ground battles this high level in the UFC as of late.
And not only that, we rarely see them actually engage this way. A lot of times when you see two really, really good grapplers in MMA, even if they go to the grappling, they tend to be very, very conservative about what they're doing. Like, okay, I've got full guard. He's going to try to pass. I'm going to try to stall. And that wasn't the case here. Again, Maia gets taken down, throws up a triangle attempt. Askren gets his head free, switches to an omoplata sweep. Askren rolls through. Maia gets on top. Askren tries to base out to his knees. Maia spins to his back because Maia's back taking and guard passing is god tier in mixed martial arts. Gives up again, gets the back with one hook in. Askren explodes through, scrambles into him, gets on top. They wind up back on it was very fast and near the end of the round, and it was brilliant. And then we get into the third round, and both guys are kind of marked up on the face because they've been hitting each other a lot. Askren in the second round really kind of dialed in this step in right uppercut to kind of counter Maia's straight left. And someone with better punching power would have caused Maia a lot of problems. But Askren was doing kind of the hockey dad punches.
So this was the sharpest Maia looked in a long time. It almost looked like the Damian Maia of old.
In some ways, yeah. Again, then we get to the third. Askren gets this really nice. He was getting some takedowns pretty much at will. Maia wasn't as concerned with stopping his takedowns as he was landing in a position he could work from. Gets taken down. Rolls under, uses a leg lock to sweep, gets on top. Maia's passing, again, I really can't express this enough. His passing is so, so good. Gets on top, passes half guard, passes into half guard. From there, looks for full mount, winds up getting the back, body triangle. Askren tries to hand fight for a bit. Maia's able to punch the choking arm through. Doesn't even really get under the neck necessarily. But something about his squeeze, man. Damian Maia's squeeze has to be just otherworldly because Ben Askren is not the first person he's put into a submission. When I say submission position, I mean gets them to tap. without having everything, and this might seem like I'm, who the hell am I to criticize Damian Maia kind of thing. But there are established best practices for choking positions. There are people, and Maia appears to be one of them, who just have enough of a squeeze to overcome not being in the completely ideal choking position. Again, he doesn't really get all the way under the neck like you want, but he gets close enough. He gets the mechanical lock with his arms, and that's all she wrote. Again, this was
the body triangle too is a very effective technique if you have someone's back.
Depending on what you're trying to do, yes.
I've seen some guys with the body triangle, and as long as they have that, their opponent is not getting out of it. It's a very effective way to, if you're working on the ground and you're trying to gain a dominant position, at least. Like, you may not get the choke, but you'll have your opponent's back, and you'll have, the seat of advantage.
A lot of it depends on what you're trying to accomplish with the position. And there are ways to attack a body triangle, and credit to this is, Maia absolutely knows this. He made the decision. Maia's one of the few guys who I've seen in the past attack an armbar from the back. Was it Leonardo Santos or Leandro Silva, one of those two, or Gilbert Burns actually has a really sick armbar from the back. The body triangle limits that a little bit, but it's harder to reverse a body triangle than it is to reverse again, just kind of the traditional hook position. It's a bit more stable that way.
That sweep by Maia was a thing of beauty.
Well, yeah, he had a couple of them, and Askren hit a couple as well. When these two were grappling, man, I just wanted to watch these two roll. Like, give me the training footage of these two in the gym, because man, that looked like a lot of fun. Again, that was a lot of fun to watch. Those two.
When you see good ground battles, it's really good, and it just doesn't. As you said, people tend to be cautious when they face good ground opponents. But when you can see a good high-level grappling match, it's not boring. Like, I really enjoy technical ground battles when they're good, and I enjoyed the fight last night because it's not something we often see, two high-level grapplers like this engaging each other on the ground.
Yeah, again, a lot of fun. Sucks for Askren, who's now 1-2 in the UFC, but it does bear noting as far as Ben Askren goes. He done
George Masvidal a star, so I mean,
he did that.
So you can't argue the trade with Demetrius Johnson paid off.
Oh, it did. I mean,
it made Masvidal into a huge star. So there you go.
Well, there's a couple of things about that. One, yeah, it helped make Jorge Masvidal a star. Here's the other reality of this, and I know there's a lot of people out there who would go, now look, Demetrius Johnson has been doing great. He has, one got the better end of that deal. They got Demetrius Johnson. I mean, here's the reality of that situation. Have you watched any of Demetrius Johnson's fight in someone? And I don't mean this as like they've been bad, but if your point is, one got the better end of that deal, but you're not watching Demetrius Johnson and you are watching Ben Askren, you're wrong.
Well, that might change with the TNT deal. Isn't one's going to be on TNT now, aren't they?
Intermittently. I mean, yeah, they part of their Century event from a couple of weeks ago was on I think at some ridiculous hour on TNT, but yeah. So again, maybe it'll change. I thought
they were getting an actual broadcast deal with TNT. Was my understanding.
Yeah, again, they were. I think I'm trying to remember the start time for the One Century stuff that they did. I think that started 11 a.m. Eastern. They're not broadcast because I don't think they're live. I think they're tape delayed. So and look again, maybe that might change it in the future. I'm just saying right now, I'm loosely familiar with the numbers one has been drawing. And look, has Demetrius Johnson from a pure talent acquisition standpoint been better? Is he the better fighter of the two? Maybe. In some respects, absolutely, yes. And Demetrius is a much more well-rounded fighter. But the goal isn't just to be if you're operating at a organizational level, who's the best is somewhat secondary to who's the most interesting, who's the most viewed.
Well,
Ben Askren draws more business than Demetrius Johnson, and I hate that that's reality. I love DJ.
Well, here's my question. Why not just bring Askren in 5 or 6 years ago?
They should have.
When he was undefeated, he was still undefeated, champion, Olympic wrestler, NCAA Division I champion. I don't see the logic in not giving him some sort of opportunity or chance in the UFC. Now look, I don't know what he was asking and what he was looking for in terms of numbers, but I can't imagine. I mean, look, the UFC.
Do you not remember what Dana said about him?
I remember. Yeah, I remember Dana White said he doesn't want to fight in the UFC, which I don't believe.
No. He said he needs to go to World Series of Fighting and season up.
I don't remember him actually saying that.
That's a quote. He said that because...
Regarding Ben Askren or John Fitch?
Askren.
I remember him saying something like that, I think, about John Fitch or something.
No, because when Askren's Bellator deal was up, there were some questions about whether or not he'd wind up in the UFC, and Dana White's response was, this undefeated Olympic wrestler who's been smashing people in Bellator. No, I've seen him, but, I think he should go to World Series of Fighting and get more experience.
I mean, that makes no sense to me.
No, it was asinine.
Because look, you get Hector Lombard, and they were hoping Hector Lombard would be like an opponent for Anderson Silva, maybe. Hector Lombard, I remember Hector Lombard would have some fights where he crushed some cans, but some of his fights in Bellator weren't all that good, as I recall. Well,
Lombard benefited tremendously from a highlight reel. But he was missold relative to that. If you again, for those of us that actually watched his fights, he's not an aggressive smashing machine. Even at his best, that wasn't his game. He would smash people.
But it's not smart. Like, you paid all that money for Hector Lombard, and you justify that. But how do you justify not hiring a younger Ben Askren and trading Demetrius Johnson for?
Because I mean, look,
It's still silly to me, Robert. I'm sorry.
It is. Look, it's asinine, but I can tell you the reason. Hector Lombard had a highlight reel full of knockouts. Ben Askren did not have a highlight reel.
No, he didn't. He wasn't on paper. He wasn't the most fight-friendly, satisfying fighter. But you're still the UFC and trying to put on. I mean, neither was Jake Shields, but they still got Jake Shields.
They got Jake Shields more to screw with Strikeforce than anything else.
But they still got him, and they looked to put him in a fight with GSP.
And did.
And for very valid reasons at the time, I believed. So,
noted PED user Jake Shields.
What?
Oh, come on. Jake Shields failed multiple drug tests.
I only know of the earlier one.
Yeah, I think
It wasn't confirmed to be PEDs.
I'm pretty sure that's what it was.
He claimed it wasn't.
He claimed. I think he wound up having to pull out of another MMA fight because when there a grappling event.
There was only one. No, there was only one failed drug test. Sorry, I'm not copping to that. One drug.
I could have sworn there was a grappling event he had to pull out of because he failed one. There was something like that recently.
I only know about the one fight, the UFC 150 fight with Ed Herman.
I knew that one, but I could have sworn there was another instance.
I don't know.
Yeah. Look, if I can't remember specifics off the top of my head, I won't stand by it. So.
But look, the UFC should have got him in earlier.
Yep.
Even if he's not good, and even if he doesn't amount to much, because he had all the metrics, and he had a resume that I thought was worthy of giving a guy a shot in the UFC, because they sign guys to big contracts for less. Whatever.
The UFC is not a meritocracy.
Mm-hmm.
You'd like to think that a sport that fundamentally resolves on resolves itself in a very binary way would be more on the meritocratic side. And it is more a meritocratic than others, but it's not at all a meritocracy. Look,
I understand that. At the same time, I don't agree with it.
No, look, it sucks. I'm not advocating for it as the best situation. I'm just stating the reality.
What do you do with Damian Maia now, though?
I don't know, man. I mean, he's fought everybody.
Years old and that, but now he's won his last 3. Beat Ben Askren impressively. Do you put him in there with a Robbie Lawler, or what do you do?
You could maybe do Lawler. A Lawler fight would be. I mean, Damian Maia mentioned after this fight, he's only got like 2 more fights on his current UFC deal, or he recently signed a new one that's only for 2 fights, and he kind of plans on retiring after that and moving on with his life.
He's 41. He doesn't have long left.
And look, if he's kind of on the, I've got 2 fights left, and then I'm going to be done.
But he's still fighting at the top of his game, arguably.
He's still operating at a very high level. That much is fair.
Not long ago, we have to remember. Not long ago, he got a win over George Masvidal in 2017.
Yeah, that's the one that got him his title shot. Yeah, I think Jorge Masvidal, in the wake of this fight, Masvidal said, "If I get the belt, I want to give Maia a shot at it because Masvidal wants that fight. He wants to run that one back."
In Woodley, Covington, and Usman, it's not like they destroyed him.
Well, they did numerically, but
the fight with Woodley was awful, but it wasn't like Woodley was beating him up.
It was, as the fight wore on, it was. That fight got ugly.
He's shutting down his grappling game and just didn't do much else.
Again, the fight is, I watched it, I covered it, I thought it was a terrible fight. I still think it's the worst welterweight title fight in UFC history.
Right. But he did take that fight on about 4 weeks' notice.
Yeah, they did kind of rush that one. And I mean, look, the other losses, so you lost to Woodley in a title fight, you lost to Colby Covington, your current number 1 contender, former interim champion.
So
is that it now? He's currently the interim champion?
No, well, Usman's the current. Usman is who I was.
Yeah. He loses to Covington, current number 1 contender, former interim champion, and then Usman, the current champion. He's not losing to scrubs.
Right. And
he's losing to the class of the division.
Right. So I don't know what's going on with Lawler, but you could maybe see that fight.
I think they're trying to do Lawler at 245.
And what's going on with Ponzinibbio?
He pulled out of his fight because he was supposed to fight. Yeah, wasn't he supposed to fight Lawler at 245?
See, this is tough because I'm so high on Ponzinibbio, but
he makes it hard to really kind of be a fan of his in that respect.
Yeah, he was supposed to fight Robbie Lawler in December.
Yeah, and then he had to pull out. Which really sucks. I mean, I was really looking forward to that fight. That's a great fight on paper.
Ponzinibbio, he's been active for the last year, unfortunately.
Yeah,
he's had these long stretches of inactivity, and that's really hurt him while the division has continued to move.
Yeah, it really sucks because if you look at his streak, he's on a 7-fight winning streak.
Insane. So
yeah, he's got a really good winning streak.
I mean, provided he's going to be ready, I mean, maybe you could do a fight because look, Ponzinibbio is due for a big fight. Maia would be a big fight for him at this point, would it not?
Yeah, you could argue that.
Because Maia's top 10. Arguably a win over Askren puts him up higher, maybe 9 or 8. Darren Till is still ranked number 9, even though he's moving up.
Yeah, Darren Till should not be ranked at welterweight right now.
And Ponzinibbio hasn't fought in almost a year, so I think that fight would make sense. Let's see who else. Stephen Thompson, maybe.
He could fight the winner of Thompson Luque, because Thompson and Luque are fighting at 244. Yeah.
I like the Ponzinibbio idea better.
Yeah, I like giving Ponzinibbio that again another chance to maybe get in there with a recognizable name like that and give him a shot at.
Ponzinibbio might be higher right now, but he hasn't fought in a long time, and Maia's still in the top 10. So
you got Rafael dos Anjos hanging out there.
Now, does Rafael dos Anjos have a matchup?
I don't think. Why is he 5? I love RDA, but he's like on a 3-fight losing streak.
He lost to Leon. Okay, so there's Dos Anjos. Yeah, you could do the Dos Anjos or Ponzinibbio is what I'd be thinking about. Or you could do Ponzinibbio versus Dos Anjos. That's another idea.
Yeah, that's another good idea.
So if you want to give Ponzinibbio someone beneath him, still in the top 10, it's Maia. Above him, it's Dos Anjos. And yeah, I agree. Dos Anjos probably shouldn't be number 5 right now. Probably.
Ugh, rankings.
Yeah.
I hate the people who make these.
That's the rankings for you. Okay.
Anthony Pettis still a top 15 guy. He's only 1-1 in the division. Oh, God.
All right. Anyway. Co-main event. We have Stevie Ray losing to an incredulous Michael Johnson.
Yes, Stevie Ray defeats Michael Johnson via majority decision.
The 1915 Michael Johnson. Oh, man.
Yeah, the scores
I don't want to say cut Michael Johnson at this point because I'm sorry if that sounds mean, Michael Johnson, but man, continual disappointment for me.
It's so weird when you think about Michael Johnson. Now, for the record, the scores in this fight, there were 2 29-28s for Stevie Ray, and then one 28-28 draw. I don't hate 29-28 Ray. I think that's what I was officially. I don't hate 28-28 because I think that would have given. I think that gave Ray a 10-8 third. Can't remember which round. It was 28-28 a draw. No, 29-29 would be a draw. No, 28-28 would be a 10-8 first. No, that would be 29-29. Sorry, my math is all over the place trying to do this in my head. I frankly would not have really objected too much to 29-28 Johnson. Again, that's not the way I went, but this fight largely came down to the first round. Johnson had the second without too much controversy. Ray pretty clearly had the third. And the first was a close round. So, again, it sucks that happened again to Michael Johnson, but that's kind of what happened. I mean, Johnson is such a weird guy to get your head around because
it annoys me how upset he was after that.
Yeah, he was really like disproportionately upset about that decision.
But I'm like, when you have a close fight and it goes to the judges, I feel like when it's that close, I feel like you only have yourself to blame because
in some ways,
did he really do that much to make it doubtless he won?
No, he didn't. I mean, again, Johnson's such a weird guy because when he's on, he is one of the very best fighters in the world. That's somewhat unequivocal. Dude knocked out Dustin Poirier in 95 seconds. Pop quiz. There's only one guy who's... I gotta double check this, actually. But, yeah, Tony Ferguson has lost to exactly...
How does the guy who overperforms in some situations and then just goes on these stretches where he's losing the guys he probably shouldn't even lose to? Okay, losing to Gagey, Habib, but then he drops the featherweight, loses to Darren Elkins.
In a first round that he dominated. I mean, look, this is the only guy in the UFC that's beaten...
A fight was winning.
And he was winning the Josh Emmett fight before he got knocked out. I mean, this is the only guy in the UFC that's beaten Tony freaking Ferguson. It's Michael Johnson.
That was a while back, but yeah, it's. I don't get it.
I mean, sure, it was again. It's not contemporary. It was 2012, but the one loss that Tony Ferguson has suffered in the UFC. Yeah, he gave up an inside heel hook to Paul Sass in 3 minutes. He beat the brakes off of Jonathan Brookins in the first round of the TUF finale.
Barboza.
Yeah, walked down Edson Barboza, knocked out Gleison Tebow. And then, in all fairness,
But his record is 19-15. That's not a good record in my book.
It's not. And okay, in all fairness, the split decision he lost to Beneil Dariush, that should have gone his way. Like that was a bad decision.
Okay.
Then fights Nate Diaz in a big spot, has a good first round, and proceeds to then just stop doing everything that led him to him.
I think that was a winnable fight for him, but he gave he gave Diaz the fight he fought the way you should not fight Nate Diaz.
I mean,
it's like McGregor.
Watch the first round of that fight. Johnson wins the first round and then just stops doing what he should do. Rebounds by knocking out Dustin Poirier. And then, I mean, Poirier would go on to have a run up to the belt after that loss. I cannot for the life of me kind of get my head around Michael Johnson as a fighter because
I don't know if it's mental. I don't know if it's mental with him or what, but didn't he even have a decent showing Khabib in the first round?
He had a good 90 seconds to 2 minutes against Khabib.
Like he did tag Khabib a couple times, didn't he?
Once or twice. It got overblown by commentary, but yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
He made contact. I will never forget. Joe Rogan going, "Oh no, he's hurt." He's not.
Khabib is hittable.
Yeah, Khabib's defense is far from impervious, but
all right.
He just, has a great chin and perseveres. And
okay. So then we had
Beneil Dariush, basically
criminally underrated, criminally unsung Beneil Dariush.
Yeah, largely
submission over Frank Camacho in the first round.
Beneil Dariush, deeply underappreciated fighter. That's very true. Comes out, good body kicks, some good punching combinations, gets things down, gets the back. He made this look easy. And Frank Camacho was not an easy fight.
Because look, Dariush came into the UFC undefeated. Basically, he's been in the UFC almost 6 years. And he's only lost
4 times.
4 times. In the bloodiest, most shark-infested division in the sport. In the entire, not the UFC, in the entire sport.
Yep.
And he's won, I think this was his 11th career win. So for you to go 11-4-1 in the lightweight division over 6 years, and now he's on a 3-fight winning streak, to me that you're not the best. You're not the best of the best. Maybe you're not the elite, but you're a pretty damn good fighter in my book, I think.
Oh, he is. He absolutely is.
And he had a bit of a skid. He had a bad stretch where he lost to Edson Barboza, and Barboza, Barboza is a good fighter. He's a perennial choke artist, don't get me wrong. He is a choke artist. But Barboza has the skill level where he can beat top guys and pull off amazing knockouts in almost any fight. So he lost to that. He had a tough fight with Evan Dunham.
Boy, he gassed so hard in that fight.
It wasn't his best showing. And then he lost to Alexander Hernandez, who's also, I think, pretty underrated. He's a decent fighter.
Hernandez currently ranked number 14.
He's won his last, the Moises fight, was nothing to write home about. But he's finished his last 2 fights by submission. He's due for a fight in the top 15 now. I think. He was legit at one point. I think he was legitimately in the top 10. Was he not? Before the Chiesa loss, probably.
If he wasn't in the top 10, he was very, very close to it.
Right. I feel like he was top 10 level when he went on that nice winning streak.
Because he and Chiesa were battling to basically break towards the top 5, I think.
Right. So, to me, he's a damn good fighter, very underrated fighter.
Oh yeah,
and he looked like $1 million in this fight.
Look, Beneil Dariush is a testament to what a unforgiving division lightweight is. Because you can be that good and still be under the radar, basically.
Right.
I would actually give him the loser of Kevin Lee and Gregor Gillespie. Because that fight's coming up at... Because that fight, oh boy, I'm looking forward to that one. But the winner of that fight needs to be moving up in the world. But I think the loser and Dariush is probably a decent fight.
See, Oliveira is fighting Jared Gordon. You could fight the winner of that.
That's possible. You could just do him and Islam Makhachev. I mean, I don't even need preamble for that. That's a great fight.
Great fight. Good test, and it's a good test for Makhachev, too.
Yeah. So I think he needs to be fighting in that space now. He earned his way back. 3 in a row at lightweight, 2 finishes. Again, Dober's not a world beater. Camacho's not a world beater, but he went out there and he performed, and that's the kind of things you need to do.
Example, like he's a guy like who I think can lose, but you can't overlook him against any opponent in lightweight division.
No, he's always going to be a tough out.
I think lightweight is just one of those divisions where if you put like the top, if you put number 1 against number 25 in a tournament, you could see some surprising upsets. It's that competitive.
Oh yeah, you get guys coming into the UFC all the time at lightweight that will beat the brakes off of a ranked opponent. I mean, look at Alexander Hernandez. Unknown, comes in on relatively short notice, and Dariush was still ranked at the time. And just, again, blows him out of the water.
I don't think it's any single reason. I think it's just the athleticism, the speed, and the skill level that are sometimes that you can't always measure. You can't always measure just, on paper alone.
Yeah, lightweight also exists in terms of the body types that can compete in it. It appeals. It has like the largest possible pool of entrants worldwide.
Right.
And when you're talking about competitive athletics in the United States, by the time you get to people the size of guys who are competing at lightweight, there's not another competitive avenue for them.
It like lightweight is almost kind of like that sweet spot, right?
Yeah.
It's like that sweet spot weight.
The craziest thing, because I know some people kind of get sore when you bring up the possibility of a 165 weight class.
Yeah.
Here's the reality of this, and I looked this up numerically. I saw this, and I think it's true. I haven't done all the math on it, but if you were to, say, bump up 170 to 175, make 165 and have 155, lightweight right now is the most populated weight class in the UFC in terms of just number of bodies in the division. If you added 165, and again, even say you moved welterweight up 5 pounds, those 3 weight classes would be the 3 most populated weight classes in the UFC in terms of just number of people.
I'm not really against the idea. I don't know why Dana White is fighting the idea so much, because it would give them more. It would give them more titles, which he would probably love.
I don't know. Again, that if you're going to add a weight class, that's the one that makes sense, just numerically and logically.
Just because it seems like they could use since they're UFC is normally so bullish about the title fight being the main event, 244 notwithstanding. It seems like they could use a couple more titles, and this would not be a division where it would get too thinned out, right?
No, all 3 of those potential divisions would be fine.
They could Conor could get another belt.
Conor could. He'd probably make it. He'd come back like, I want to fight for the inaugural belt. Yeah, shut up, Conor. All right, next up, this fight. Oh God, this fight. I'm torn on this fight because on the one hand, Cyril Gane defeats Don'Tale Mayes via heel hook 446 of the 3rd round. Gane is a legitimate heavyweight prospect. And I say prospect, not contender. I don't want to see this guy moving up. He's only like 5-0. I think this was his 5th win. But he's big. He's got powerful striking. So there's force there. And he understands technique. He moves well. He does bits of shifting in his stances. He's relatively light on his feet. And again, maybe he doesn't pan out, okay? Most prospects don't. But I think he's a guy you want to pay attention to. I mean, the finishing sequence made me sad because he gets this takedown into the guard of Mayes, stands up and sits back for the leg lock. And this thing happens in slow motion. And Don'Tale Mayes is like kind of up on his hands on his seat, watching this happen, and he's seeing it, and he just kind of goes, you know what? I'm going to stay right here. I just want to catch my breath. And then, oh, God, my knee. There's no effort made to control the far side leg, which you need in a proper heel hook. I mean, Mays does zero to actually defend this, and there's a few things Gane just doesn't do technically. But it worked, and I'm going to give him credit. Look, if you're, 15 seconds away from assured victory on the scorecards, and he was, and he kind of decides, you know what, screw it, I'll try a leg lock, I can appreciate that mentality. So, Cyril Gane, genuine prospect at heavyweight. Again, might not pan out, but probably one of the better, raw prospects the division has right now. And I'm a sucker for a heel hook, even if it's a badly applied one. So it made me sad as someone who watches a lot of, higher level grappling and watches guys like, Gordon Ryan and Gary Tonin, Eddie Cummings and whatnot. And they get guys in, a position much more technically refined than this, and the guy's actually defending properly, so nothing comes of it. But this is MMA, not jiu-jitsu, and I get it. So good for Gane, who just needs to develop still. There's a lot of rawness to him, but it's heavyweight, man. They need all the legitimate prospects they can get at this point, and he's one of them. So good for him. All right, Jeff, anything?
Nope.
All right. And kicking off the main card, good fight here. If not for Maia and Askren, this probably would have been fight of the night. Muslim Salikov defeated Laureano Staropoli via unanimous decision, 230-26 and 129-28. Believe it or not, I'm okay with all three of those. There was one round, I can't remember which one. Forgive me off the top of my head. I'd been up for many, many hours at this point. When in coverage, so some of this is going to be a bit foggy when I'm doing it from memory. There was one round that I thought maybe could have gone to Staropoli, and I didn't really have an issue with Salikov getting a 10-8. I think it was the third round. I want to say third, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. So I'm okay. Again, I'm not going to yell at any of the scorecards for this fight. I don't think it's worth the effort. This was fun. This was kind of what I expected. Both guys are action fighters. They're strikers first and foremost. They came out, they both kicked each other a lot. They both tried wheel kicks. They both landed them at different points. Salikov, just a more technically proficient striker, found more openings, landed better shots. How it goes sometimes. But entertaining fight, all things considered. Come on, you got to have something for the king of Kung Fu, Jeff.
Nope.
Nothing for the sultan of spinning shit.
I mean, good for him.
The philosophical adversary of the Diaz brothers, Muslim Salikov. Sorry, jokes aside.
I mean, we'll see where he goes.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to make a run at the belt or anything. He's just a little bit too old.
3-1, but he's doing well. He's doing okay.
He's doing well so far. Yeah, he had the rough debut fight against Alex Garcia. But he's won 3 in a row since then. He finished 2 of those violently. He had a good long winning streak to get into the UFC. So, I'm glad that he's getting paid. All right, as for the prelims, Randa Marcos defeated Ashley Yoder via split decision. No one cared. Rafael Fiziev defeated Alex White via unanimous decision, 129-28, 230-27. Fiziev put a beating on Alex White. Just better striker all the way around and punished him the entire fight. Movsar Evloev and Enrique Barzola had a great scrap. Evloev wins via unanimous decision, 229-28, 130-27. I think I was 30-27. These two, again, this is a great fight. Some really good jabbing. You could see Evloev's work kind of with Peter Yan paying off. He adopted some of those kind of same mannerisms and was landing good jabs, had some good upper body movement, superb wrestling from both gentlemen, good takedown defense, good scrambles, pretty much everything you want in a fight. Really good fight. At heavyweight, Sergey Pavlovich defeated Maurice Green via TKO 2 minutes 11 seconds into the first round. It's heavyweights, at least it ended quickly. Maurice Green was unhappy with the stoppage, but I think if all you look at is the final knockdown sequence, then maybe you can argue it's early. Taken in consideration with the entire 5 to 10 second sequence that led up to it, I think this stoppage is perfectly fine. Loma Lukbunmi defeated Alexander Albu via split decision. For the record, screw the judge that scored this for Albu. I don't know what you were smoking, buddy, but it must have impaired your ability. You must have gone brain dead for this fight. I'm not saying Albu got, completely blown out of the water. She had periods of success. She landed some decent right hands on occasion. And she had bits of success in the clinch here and there. But again, just who won each round? It's Lukbunmi, and it's not that close. Lukbunmi, an elite level Muay Thai fighter, normally an atom weight. She's fighting up at straw weight. There's a lot of her MMA game that needs to be adapted still. This is her first. She's only 3-1, 4-1 now in MMA. But you get someone who's really elite in one of the specialities in MMA, and they can do a lot with it. And she is very clearly an elite level Muay Thai fighter. And kicking everything off, Rafael Pessoa defeated Jeff Hughes via unanimous decision, 30-27 across the boards. It's a heavyweight fight that went the distance. What do you want me to say? It existed. All right, Jeff, that was UFC. Any burning desires from that group of prelims?
Ronda Marcos won a fight, so...
Well, she lost the one before this, so yeah, of course she won this one.
So she'll lose her next one.
If the pattern gets... If past is prologue, that's what's happening.
That's about it.
Yeah, again, on the whole, not a bad... Again, the fights that you looked at on paper and went, that might be fun, were fun. Evloev and Barzola was a lot of fun. Salikov and Startopoli was a good battle. I'm not complaining too much about this card. I will complain about the way I had to deal with it because this thing started at 3:30 a.m. my time, and I'm just the kind of guy who would rather be conscious for longer than wake up earlier, so I just got to stay up for a really long period of time. That was fun. But thanks to anyone who read my coverage live or the report that's up right now in the MMA Zone of 411mania.com. I appreciate it. I know this was not a very hyped event, but I appreciate that you guys read and comment. I've said this before. I'm not fishing for comments in the sense that please interact with me. I'm so insecure. But I don't have access to the traffic report for what I do. So if you want to, the only way I know anyone's there is through comments. So I appreciate it. Again, look, and I don't care if you don't have anything to say. Lord knows I've done that. So I just appreciate you guys reading. So thank you very much. Okay. Again, normally at this point in time, we would go into talking about UFC 244 next week, or this coming Saturday. But we had a thing this week, and I think we have to talk about that first. So news breaks. What was it, Thursday? I can't remember if it was Thursday or Friday. One of those two.
I'm trying to. Yeah, it was in the second half of last week.
Yeah, and I think it was Friday.
October 24th. It looks like when it came out.
So okay, yeah, that would have been Thursday, I think then.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, Thursday.
Yeah, Nat Diaz mentions that he posts on social media that he has failed a drug test, which is, oh God, I'm going to yell at USADA in a minute, I promise.
Was it even a failure or what?
Boy, wouldn't you like to know that if there was some kind of clear guidelines on that point. Anyway, he comes out that he says, I failed a drug test. I'm not going to stay quiet about it. Clear my name, and I won't be at. He denies it.
Well,
He
look, the UFC or USADA never said anything about this.
No, there was no. Yeah, this was Nate, who was informed of adverse findings, and his response was, and apparently he was the way he phrased it, and I don't have a problem believing this is.
But the UFC and USADA technically weren't accusing him of failing a drug test yet.
No.
So let's just use facts here and let's be honest without getting into hysterics.
Okay. I'm happy to do so. That's just what Nate said.
Okay. But I mean, there are fallacies here in what he's saying. Now,
sure, he is presenting his side of the argument.
I acknowledge that what Diaz here was probably very smart by putting it out in the public first, because no one believes he's doping. You know, you look at him, you don't really. Diaz, for all intents and purposes, passes the eye test for most people. So it was very smart for him to put this out because, from Diaz's standpoint, he has nothing to lose, right? So he does this and sort of puts it all on the UFC and USADA.
Yeah, he very publicly forced the UFC and USADA to make the next move as far as this goes, right, rather than being reactionary. It's
okay. So here's what ESPN reported. According to the UFC, the USADA said the USADA. Well, okay.
That's actually more correct. But.
Yeah, but I'm thinking if it's more correct if you say it out in full. The U.S. Anti-Doping Agency.
Yeah, so, but because it's an acronym, not an initialization, you can just use it in a sentence.
Right. Set a threshold on Ligandrol in late August after a rash of contaminated supplement cases involving SARM, that's an acronym SARM, positives with its athletes. That decision occurred more than 1 month before Diaz's atypical finding, which apparently happened in October. The threshold is set at 100 picograms per milliliter, which Diaz tested well below. However, numerous athletic commissions, which also hold jurisdiction over mixed martial arts contests, have not yet set this same threshold. The New York State Athletic Commission, for example, still has the right to hold a hearing on Diaz's case. The UFC Chief Business Officer, Hunter Campbell, said it is not indicated it intends to do so.
Good on the New York State Athletic Commission.
There's a lot of gobbledygook here. Something about Neil Magny tested positive for low level of LGD 4033. Only trace amounts were found. It's believed that Magny ingested the substance from a tainted supplement. USADA cleared him to fight last month. Unlike Diaz, Magny was unable to produce the specific supplement that was contaminated. Diaz's team was able to send supplements to the USADA for testing at the World Anti-Doping Agency Certified Sports Medicine Research and Testing Lab in Salt Lake City. The supplements were tested Thursday night. So in like 2 days, they turned this around.
Well, sort of.
I don't know how that's possible.
Well, hang on. There's some of this that is, the timeline is a little bit fuzzy, and consequently it gets lumped in with when it was reported as when it happened. Again, the drug test in question occurred earlier this month.
It says that it says right here the supplements were tested Thursday night.
Yeah, but they were already aware of the adverse finding and had submitted them prior to Diaz's public statement.
They submitted the supplements?
I believe so.
But this is ESPN, Robert. They're saying the supplements were tested Thursday night.
I have no doubt that is when the supplements in question were tested. The issue at hand is when they were acquired. Like, if Diaz turned them over 2 weeks ago, then sure, they would have already been in the laboratory.
Could they have been expedited?
Possibly.
To be done overnight?
I imagine they could. I'm not deeply familiar with all
I,
of the. I have a cursory understanding of some of the science, but
I'm forgetting when, but I recall Jeff Novinsky one time saying that if you have a tainted supplement, it's your get out of jail free card or something.
well, it's an extenuating circumstance that should be considered at a very
So Diaz didn't. Here's what he didn't say. He didn't say he wasn't taking any supplements. He said, I only take whole food or natural food supplements. So
yeah, apparently the supplement in question is a organically grown and processed vegan-friendly multivitamin from Whole Foods.
Well, apparently not.
Well, no. That's how it. Again, however much you want to take that with.
Is
that's
it a Whole Foods brand?
I think so. I think that's what he said.
Doesn't he have a big lawsuit here against Whole Foods?
I don't know. Maybe.
I don't know. Jeff Bezos better get his crack legal team together right now. Don't you think?
Yeah. Again, some of that will depend on whether or not they want to pursue any sort of legal action. Some of it will depend on whether or not there's even a case there if you wanted to pursue litigation.
What confuses me is that that USADA was able to resolve this so quickly. That's a little questionable to me, and that's a little sketchy. I'm sorry.
Of course it is. USADA is a sketchy agency.
Well, here's my other point on this. You can't just blame USADA here.
I'm not only blaming USADA.
The same people who are getting so outraged right now about USADA are the same ones who were outraged when UFC did not have a random testing protocol in place.
Oh, okay. Or remember when they started a little bit of random testing and suddenly everyone was failing and everyone got into their pearl clutching and duvet and like fainting on the duvet about the drug problem in the sport. Heaven forbid.
Kevin Iole and Dave Meltzer were all going nuts.
I mean, yeah, the list, it's everybody. Like, that list is longer than my arm.
Like fighters would go on Inside MMA and would be like over half the fighters in the industry, or 80% of people are cheating or are on PEDs.
I mean, they still are under.
They would make clickbait headlines. So what do we do? What do you want to do here, Robert? Do we get rid of USADA?
Yes.
Who is all right? So then, what do we have?
Okay, hang on. There's a couple of things that need to be really kind of parsed out here. One is that, yeah, look, the reaction that we all had, and I will throw my hands up in the air and say I am as guilty of this as everybody else. Okay, I am not on a soapbox here saying no, this was all you. Me too. Okay, first and foremost, I was not the lone guy on the hill saying no, you're all crazy. I was part of the mob. All right, I'll own it. That was on me, and you and me. That's on everybody. We all did it. Like that. That was a bit of, I don't think I ever got hysterical the way some people did, but I said it was a problem. I was somewhat in favor of bringing USADA on board when they announced it. So again, this was, my hands are not clean as far as this goes.
But my problem is that people now, like, people are acting like they never wanted this and they never were asking for this in the first place.
Yeah, anybody claiming that?
Like, what have you done? Well, what have you done? You wanted this. This is what. I'm sorry, people. This is what you wanted, and we're asking for. You wanted year-round random drug testing. You wanted a clean sport. You wanted to level the playing field. How do you do that and make it fair? I don't know. Is it even possible?
No, there is no such. I have to tell this to kids in my studio on occasion where I kind of help teach sometimes. Let's just dismiss the notion of a fair fight. It doesn't exist. There is no such thing. Unless you're fighting your identical twin, there is no such thing as a fair fight.
Well, I mean,
so what advantages or disadvantages are you going to allow?
But people would use the argument, like in baseball, you're hitting a ball with a stick. In combat sports, you're actually like knocking people out and endangering your life. So,
which again, that's the generalized argument that gets brought up.
but Dana White has used that argument.
Yeah,
and Dana White has I think Dana White, part of the problem with him was when everyone was going crazy about TRT. After that became a huge thing, when that came out, Chael Sonnen basically like opened Pandora's box on TRT, and then Vitor Belfort became the poster child for TRT, and then Dana White came out and said he basically said TRT is cheating, but then Dana White continued basically giving it out to the top UFC stars who were out and out using TRT, and we knew they were using TRT after it became a known fact, correct? So I'm like, I get that Dana White's a promoter, but it seemed like he came out against TRT and then was giving guys a pass who were definitively publicly using it, which to me was, you talk about bad optics with Greg Hardy. To me, that whole TRT thing was bad optics.
Well, for the record, if you want to use the argument that because people are fighting in a cage, maybe the standard should be different. I am not in favor of no drug testing. I want to make this clear. I'm not. To me, it's simply not clear what the best solution is just yet.
There are commissions to do it. Do you want?
I don't know.
Where they can.
Well, hang on. Let me.
Before USADA, like every once in a while, like commissions would have random tests, or the UFC would finance USADA testing a little bit. UFC would conduct. There was a spate at one time when UFC would have fights out of the country where it was only UFC regulating, where they would have a lot of drug test failures. A lot when this was pre-USADA though. I remember like years ago there was a time where you'd almost hear every event like a fighter would fail a drug test that was not regulated by a commission, basically, where it was the UFC doing the testing. I don't know like who they were commissioning to do it, but they were doing testing at one point.
Yeah, and as far as again, what do I want to see? I don't know. It's a rough thing because for some reason, and I'm not sure at what point these two wires got crossed.
Okay.
We for some reason think that fighting should be treated from a like perceptive standpoint the same way that we think about like the Olympics and amateur sport testing, which is oh god, don't get me started.
What about professional sports where granted there are unions and player associations?
This is I think this is kind of the real takeaway. Let's consider for a moment, the NFL or the NBA or the since baseball's going on, the baseball. Look at what those guys do. Like for a living physically.
Yeah.
You think they're not using? Of course they're using.
Guys fail drug tests and they still do. It happens.
Yeah.
But
here's the reality.
They're also unionized and they have associations that agree on fines and punishments as well.
Which would be a huge step forward for fighters, I think. And again, here's the other thing.
It would be a step forward if fighters had a say in how the testing was done. I agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, unequivocally, like the stuff got thrown on them. USADA got unilaterally imposed onto the fighters. And look, I'm not saying,
but I say in response to that, I say, well, if we have fighters actually, going on HDNet and complaining about it and saying it's rampant and over half then we shouldn't take them at their word anyway. And if MMA reporters are in the media are saying that too and enforcing that, then why should we, then we should, to me, you can't have it both ways. You can't have.
There is no player or fighter.
Here, but I feel like there isn't.
Well, hang on. There is no sports. There is no players' association in any sport in the world that would agree to bring a USADA-like program into their sport.
Right.
None. Absolutely none. Again, it's somewhat unilaterally imposed onto amateur athletes.
USADA was founded by the U.S. Paralympic Committee.
Yeah, again, most major nations have a USADA equivalent because the IOC kind of mandates it.
Okay, so is USADA not a division of the IOC? Is what you're telling me?
I have to look up the specific
or the U.S. Olympic Committee, because that's what their Wikipedia page basically says.
I think that's what I do believe that's kind of where they were founded as far as that goes. But again, they're also not cheap, and the UFC is paying for all of this.
I feel like there are questions here that still need to be answered about what happened with Tom Lawler and Frank Mir. Just look,
I'll tell you what happened to Tom Lawler.
Jeff Nowitzki, I feel, has never properly addressed. Now, maybe, and let me say, there could be valid explanations for what happened to Tom Lawler and Frank Mir and Machida, but I don't feel like they've been answered properly.
I feel pretty confident telling you what happened to Lawler. He just was the subject of draconian practices before they evolved. Like by the time Tom Lawler's 2-year suspension was up, the practice of USADA was a 6-month suspension for the identical situation that he found himself in 2 years prior.
But Josh Barnett, and I'm not saying Josh Barnett is a choir boy here because he has messed up a lot.
Well, by his own admission, he's not a choir boy.
But this latest instance, based on USADA, he did nothing wrong, basically, but he was still out of fighting for 1.5 years trying to get this resolved. And I'm not sure that's right.
It's not. By most standards.
And I don't think, here's my other, I don't think fighters should have to pay for any of this either, unless they're found unequivocally guilty. Do they have to pay for the supplement test?
Oh yeah.
Why do the fighters have to pay?
Because USADA has no interest in the truth of the situation.
But isn't UFC paying for the USADA testing? So I'm
sure.
not.
The no.
Why when this comes up, why a fighter has to pay for the testing of the supplements? That makes no sense.
Because you're reimposing a new set of testing onto the laboratory. It's not properly scheduled out. And look, you think the UFC cares? You think the UFC cares that Tom Lawler failed a drug test and got railroaded?
I mean, the UFC didn't care when guys were failing random tests.
No, they don't. No, they don't.
It was Joe MMA fan.
Yeah, look, the UFC is not going to foot the bill for a fighter to try and prove their innocence. They're just not.
They should.
Maybe.
There should be there should be resources here.
I mean, hang on? Did you hear what Frank Mir mentioned about that in loosely that same vein?
No. What did he say?
And there's transcripts of this. I think I think it was on Joe Rogan, but it was on some podcast, if not Joe Rogan. Might have been Shales. But he was asked about his experience with USADA because he had that failed drug test, and he details what a clown fiesta it was in many respects. And he closed by mentioning that he had personally spent, what was it, like, I can't remember if it was $10,000 or $30,000.
Right.
And then he kind of closed by mentioning, and I know for a fact that, John Jones has paid a lot more than I have doing basically the same thing.
Well, John Jones is part
that's not to say John's a choir boy, okay? This is not, oh, poor John Jones. But the circumstance that's currently situated with USADA, if you can't pay to fight those rulings and whatnot, you can't fight them. Because a lot of that is just what you can pay for.
That's something that has to be changed. If I were to change something about any of this.
You know what I think there's a few things that, again, that should happen. One, I would like some collective bargaining representing the fighters to actually be involved in the discussion. I think that's paramount.
Okay.
Because otherwise, I mean, there's a serious question
UFC
about the ethics of it otherwise.
It's going to run to that type of change. So,
well, again, the UFC's not going to like it.
If the fighters want that, they have to get that themselves.
Yeah, that's on them. I am not. At this point, it is abundantly clear through multiple iterations of essentially the same circumstance across, again, multiple iterations, multiple decades. This is the best scenario. This is the best scenario for you. And if they're not going to try and make it happen, I can't. I mean, you, me, nobody else can do it on their behalf. They're not going to do it.
What does the UFC stay with USADA?
If not presented with a viable alternative, they will.
Okay.
Here's the thing about this is the other thing about USADA.
Do you know what their current contract standing is?
I do not off the top of my head. Here's one of the things about USADA that you have about the UFC bringing them in that you have to understand. And this is everybody.
Oh, they renewed it in December 2018.
I don't know for how long. I don't know how long it goes for, you know. The UFC brought in USADA not in some grand moral gesture to clean up the sport. They brought them in so they could have essentially liability insurance. Because God forbid somebody dies in the cage. And if the UFC, and again, hang on.
That's not the only reason.
No, this is not the only reason, but
come on.
I think it is the primary consideration. They're willing to spend this money so that if some catastrophic...
They were already testing fighters.
Sure. But but again, some of this is brought on, and let me be clear. Some of this was incentivized by the reaction of the fan base and the media.
More than some.
Okay. However much you want to ascribe to it. I'm not going to debate the...
I would say it was at least half the reason.
Sure. I'll buy that. The UFC needed some kind of insurance policy.
Yes, an insurance policy because they were rapidly expanding, and
again,
but look, the news got announced hot off the heels of what happened with Anderson Silva.
Yeah, that too. And again, I think the UFC is primarily trying to inure themselves from culpability when someone gets catastrophically injured. I mean, look,
before USADA, people were also complaining about marijuana, and USADA doesn't test for that. Out of competition.
Which they shouldn't. There's no reason to.
Right, I agree, and they don't. So they got that right at least.
Again, there's elements of scientific literacy within USADA that vastly outstrip certain commissions. That's unequivocally true.
Okay.
But again, they were brought in primarily as a stopgap against backlash should somebody... Right. I mean, look, say somebody, is catastrophically injured or dies in the UFC cage. That's a terrible thing. I am not wishing for this. Let me be very, very clear about this. But if it repeated over enough iterations, it's going to happen. And if the person who kills someone else then fails a drug test, imagine the UFC needs some kind of stopgap in place from both a legal liability standpoint and a public relations liability standpoint.
I will say what Diaz did here was like some 3D chess or something, because to make a statement like that publicly is very risky, but it paid off for him in dividends.
In 48 hours, he got USADA to bend over backwards and admit he did nothing wrong. You know what? Good for him. Man.
But they never really say he did anything wrong in the first place. But what this did was it kind of got the court of public opinion on his side. And then a day later, Dana White tweeted, "The fight is on. I 100% knew Nate wasn't taking anything to cheat." So,
and here's the other thing about, and this deals a little bit with the USADA thing. USADA is an opaque organization. Any transparency you're able to get out of them, you have to pull, is like pulling teeth.
I mean, they were transparent at first.
And they gave the appearance of transparency.
All right.
By which I mean, hang on.
There's not enough transparency right now, and I think Jeff Novinsky is the VP of Athlete Health and Safety.
What a crap.
He works for the UFC. He does work for the UFC.
Yeah.
Jeff Novinsky has not done an adequate job to answer a lot of these burning questions.
Not even close. I mean, again,
for the USADA, he works for the UFC. He needs to do a better job to mediate and just talk about this, and he hasn't. Even when he was on Joe Rogan, I felt
he
was talking a lot.
The only other time I saw someone on the Joe Rogan Experience waste that much time saying nothing was Jack Dorsey.
All right, and here's my thing about Frank Mir. Frank Mir could be lying, Robert, or he could be heavily skewing his statements. You can't deny that's outside the realm of possibility.
It's within the realm of possibility, but nothing he said in that statement fell outside.
My problem is only gotten his side to all of that. Like, there could be logical explanations to all of this, but Novinsky has not helped his case by responding to these things. I'm sorry.
No, he hasn't. And look, here's the other part of the reality of this.
It's kind of like this ABC News thing. The defenders of ABC News. Like, people said what they did was not intentional and was not fake news. They had defenders, right? The Kentucky gun show.
Yeah, I remember we talked a little bit about it.
And like some commentators were like, ABC, they should explain this and explain what happened and how this happened. And they have not had one peep about how the mistake happened. Not one peep. So that's a problem.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason
there has here, like, or if there's not a mistake, come out and talk about it and explain step by step how you reach these conclusions. I don't think that's a lot to ask of Jeff Novinsky.
I mean, some of it depends on, again, how much he actually knows relative to USADA's process and practices. They don't want to admit
this is his purview. He should know. He should.
Some of it, yes. Some of it might be proprietary. Hang on.
A lot, if not all.
Some of it might be proprietary to USADA itself, that they're not going, and his information they're not going to give to an employee of an organization that they're doing testing for.
I feel like this goes against what they promised when they started the program.
There was no promise. Like, they just brought it in. There was no. Well, I mean, look, they don't want to acknowledge the fact that the science they're dealing with is not hard.
And there are too many loopholes. There are too many loopholes in their policies. It looks like there are a lot of inconsistencies that just explain them. If there is a logical reason and explanation, explain it. I'm sorry. I don't think you're giving away state secrets and proprietary information by explaining some of these valid questions that are being asked.
So again, some of that will depend on how they arrive at it. It might be. I'm not saying it is.
Other than that, I'm simply asking for some hindsight for the people who are being outraged.
Yeah, would be nice if all the people now going, boy, USADA sucks, to just remember what your reaction was, guys. And again, I'm happy to throw myself in there. Like, I have now lived and learned, and I think we've gone down the wrong path.
I'm not throwing myself in there. Because I'm like, the commissions are doing it, the UFC is doing it. This is what they rule. These are the rules.
Yeah, and again,
people said it wasn't good enough and the sport was dirty. So, whatever.
It's sports. Sport's always dirty. Guys, get over it.
Well, people can't get over it. I'm not lumping myself in with that group.
I mean, again, we're dealing with science that isn't necessarily settled.
I'm not even anti-PID. I'm just, if those are the rules and you break the rules and you get caught, it's on you. That's always my general philosophy. I don't think we really needed USADA. And now we have USADA, and now people are angry. Like Luke Thomas.
Among others.
Luke Thomas is all, I want to see excellence. Doesn't care about PEDs. Which he was not outspoken, but pre-USADA, he was never outspoken about that. Never.
Well, hey, look, circumstances change.
Now he's basically pro-PEDs.
Hey, look, there were a lot of people who thought the communists overthrowing the czars in Russia were a good idea. Circumstances change.
Okay. I think we can get, all right, now that we've had our unload, we've had our talk about this, I think we can get, now that the fight appears to be on.
Apparently was never technically off.
Well, it's safely on for now, so now we can get into it.
We have, 5 more days of potentially things going haywire.
True.
Let's all hope not, but I'd be remiss not to acknowledge the possibility.
Nat Diaz, George Masvidal is still on for now at New York City.
Hang on, the last thing I want to mention about USADA very, very briefly.
Sure.
The science that they're utilizing is not nearly as subtle as people like to think it is. Their practices are constantly in flux. I mean, again, they mentioned in the wake of this that, well, we've implemented a threshold policy since August. There's at least one reporter I know who, because he mentioned this and I read his stuff, that he asked them sometime in August if they were going to, change their policy, and they said no. So there is very little transparency here. This is not an organization who fundamentally has the fighters' best interests in mind first and foremost. They're not paid by the fighters; they're paid by the UFC.
Well, they are paid by the fighters if they do the testing.
If the fighters have to basically buy however much time of the people involved, yeah. But the contract USADA has is not with the fighters; it's with the UFC.
Is this like the science of enhanced interrogations, like in that movie, The Report?
I don't know. Enhanced interrogation's a weird topic, anyway.
This movie I saw with Adam Driver called The Report about the
Guantanamo Bay, right?
What?
It stemmed from Guantanamo Bay, where they were given permission to use quote unquote enhanced interrogation methods, which was a loose terminology applied to a series of, for want of a better expression.
It was more like the whole enhanced interrogation program for the Bush administration, not just because of Guantanamo.
There wasn't it like the head of the CIA or something who kind of signed off on a report that here's these things that are basically torture, but for legal and like linguistic purposes might fall outside the bounds of. Like, it's not just yelling at you with a light in your face for a la interrogation, and it's not they did have like lawyers sign off on their program to how they avoid the whole legal definition of torture, even though it's basically, for all intents and purposes, it's torture.
But the reason I mention this is like, the science they're using, and then in the movie, like, they talk about, does the science back it up? And they're like, yes. God, and they're like, what science? I'm a psychologist.
The vast majority of the scientific community has, by this point in time, acknowledged that torture is deeply inefficient. Right. People being tortured will tell you what they think you want to hear just to get it to stop.
Right, but then they're like, what's going on? What's happening here? Well, he's a true resistor. And it's an interesting movie. I would recommend everyone go see it.
My thing about that is more that for the longest time with certain compounds and PEDs and whatnot, they had a very specific half-life within the human body, so you could backtrack them very easily.
Right.
Most of the stuff we're dealing with now does not conform to that. This is one of the things that Frank Mir mentioned, and however much salt you want to take this with, fair enough. That he was told initially, for this to pop up into your system, it must have fallen. You must have taken it. Hang on.
Frank Mir. Do you directly want to take Frank Mir at his word?
I don't know, but I know that he's not the only one that this has
Here's
happened.
my problem with Frank Mir is no one's asked him the hard questions. That's my problem with Frank Mir. When everyone talks to Frank Mir, they always ask him the questions from a presumption of innocence, which is fine and all, but like they don't ask him, did you ever take anything? I've never heard anyone ask him that, ever. Not Ariel Helwani, not his co-host, not Joe Rogan, no one.
It's a fair question. I mean, look, at some point in his career, I assume he has.
Oh, I feel like let him say that, you know? Why is... I mean, Mark Hunt is convinced he's a doper.
It would not shock me if Frank Mir has at points in his life utilized various substances. I mean, the man bulked up 20 pounds in a very, very short period of time.
His career where I thought his body looked very and he was a TRT user.
Yeah. I mean, look, we all joke, we occasionally talk about, suspicious body types. Look at the difference in Frank Mir's physiology from the first Brock Lesnar fight to the second.
Frank Mir is not an old man. He's only 40 right now. He was using TRT back in 2012 when he was not even 33 years old. That's suspicious. Based on what the medical experts were saying at the time, that was suspicious.
Yeah, but again, the point being, there's a lot of these things that we don't really understand all the half-life, all the excretion rates. USADA's now put forward their pulsing hypothesis, and at best, it's a hypothesis. It's not even been sustained via evidence enough to support it being a theory.
I want to move on from USADA because we could talk about this for 5 hours, I think.
Yeah. So anyway, again, point being,
USADA get your act together. Jeff Nowitzki, get your act together, or I'm going to ask you to resign. How about that?
You asked what I'd like to see. I think there's a couple of things. Again, one, I'd like a fighters association. I think a reasonable thing would be, and this, bear in mind, this does have to be voluntary because it's in the name of the group, but VADA, the Voluntary Anti-Doping Association, which does not impose, it's not a sanctioning body. It doesn't impose fines. It is literally just testing.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to think that if you could get...
I heard UFC doesn't like VADA.
UFC doesn't like them because then they'd have to come up with their own guidelines for punishment. Because VADA's not going to say, oh, you tested positive for X. Here's how long you should be suspended for.
All right.
They just say, hey, you tested here's what came back in your test. Do with that what you will. And the UFC does not want the responsibility of that.
I don't know the proper way to fix this, but
well, I think again,
having fighters to say over the fines, punishment, and testing, I think would help. But I don't think UFC is going to allow that.
Well, I mean, they will if the fighters actually get together, but that's a
whole
other thing.
That's a whole other podcast.
Yeah. Again, I think you get them together. I think if you could get all the fighters to voluntarily agree to be part of VADA, and have them and have the association and the UFC kind of come up with what substances they wish to consider banned, what levels they want to consider banned or unsafe. And if those two parties all agree with full buy-in from all parties present, the fans will get on board. The fans don't care one iota about the drug testing policy in any other sport. Well, in any other professional sport. We're clear about that. Like, no one cares in the NFL when someone fails a drug test. No one cares in the NBA. It doesn't really happen in the NBA even. You think it's because people aren't using? Look at what NBA players do to their bodies. Look at the size of those guys. You bet your ass they're using stuff. And you know what? I don't care. Everyone knows what's on the table as far as that goes.
Failed drug tests in the NBA.
Very, very infrequently.
DeAndre Ayton, 25-game suspension for failed drug tests.
It's a deeply infrequent thing relative to the number of players and the number of games. Okay. Not saying it never happens.
I mean, there's a lot of basketball. I mean, basketball and baseball are much longer seasons and much more games.
Yeah, they're grueling, man. I've played basketball.
In MMA, you might fight like once a year if you're, a top guy.
Sure. There's also the training in MMA. But again, that's
All right,
I just like everyone. Well, let me finish my point.
You're killing me here.
Let me finish my point and we'll move on. Again, I just want everyone to kind of agree to the terms that we're all going to go by and not have stuff unilaterally forced. And I'll go along with it. And look, if I think your drug testing policy is BS, I'm happy to say that, but I'm also happy to kind of go along with, all right, if this is the buy-in everyone agrees on, let the fan base decide whether or not, what they're going to do about it. Again, the NFL, no one cares. The NBA, no one cares.
People care.
Sure.
With that.
Well, okay. When I say no one, that's not literal no one. The vast majority of people do not care. They're happy to watch the sport. And I would bet almost anything that the MMA fan base would follow that pattern.
I think you're ignoring the hysteria over Mark McGuire, Sammy Sosa, Barry Bonds, and all those dudes.
I remember those.
There were congressional hearings.
Yeah, which was a giant waste of taxpayer time.
It was, but to say no one cared is a mass over.
No one's cared in 20 years.
All right, let's move. I want to move on. Let's talk about the actual fight.
Yeah, all right. So moving on to UFC 244.
I'm picking Nate Diaz.
Jorge Masvidal, Nate Diaz in your main event. This is a great fight. Let's start with the obvious.
Fan perspective, from an action perspective, on paper, it's a great fight. However, I have to say, sometimes fights like this, that on paper look like barn burners, have turned out to be awful. It doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen.
It does happen on occasion. I have a hard time imagining it with these two participants, but it would not be the first time ever that had happened. As for who I think is going to win, I'm kind of leaning towards Masvidal at the moment.
Okay. I mean, Masvidal, his power, like...
His power combined with Nate's utter lack of defense. Like, Nate's defense is, boy, that didn't really hurt, hit me again.
But Diaz is really good at just making guys fight the way he wants them to.
He's good at that. There's a couple of underrated elements of Nate's game that everyone likes to forget about. He's good in the clinch. That's where he does a surprisingly high amount of his work, is getting you in the clinch. He's got good knees from that position. He's good about getting you on the fence. This is a weird thing to say, because while Nate is susceptible to leg kicks, he's also not the worst when it comes to finding a way to deal with them. He's not going to check every leg kick you throw at him, but he'll check a couple and will dissuade you. I mean, he broke Anthony Pettis' foot checking a leg kick. You can use leg kicks to substantially affect him, but it's not as simple as everyone seems to make it out to be. Well, I'll go out there and I'll throw leg kicks. That's not the best. Like, that has to be part of your plan, not your plan. Both guys can fight for 5 rounds. We've seen both of them do it. I think Diaz's propensity to wear damage might be a bit of a problem for him in this fight, because Nate gets busted up in fights more often than not. And Masvidal will put damage on you. Again, Masvidal's got a good kicking game. He doesn't use it all the time, but I think he will in this instance. He's not got to worry as much about being taken down. Nate doesn't have the best wrestling takedowns, but his will work especially if they surprise you. I mean, he got Pettis with a couple of them just because he surprised him with them more than anything. He's pretty good. Again, he's good in the clinch. He doesn't have the best throws or trip game, but he just works you in the clinch very well. A lot of his boxing, especially kind of his 1-2s, if you engage him at the proper distance, he will overextend and lean for those. He also gets very frustrated very easily in the fight. And Masvidal might fight him in such a way that will frustrate him, and he can then capitalize on it. Again, this is a really fan-friendly fight. I am looking forward to it. I hope it holds together. And I will not, let me be clear, I won't be shocked if Nate Diaz wins at all. He's a really good fighter. But I'm leaning a little bit towards Masvidal right now, and I just hope nothing else crazy happens over the next couple of days, because I want these two to get in the cage and fight. So you mentioned you were leaning towards Nate. I apologize if I cut you off there. What else did you have on this one?
Just in a long drawn out brawl, I tend to favor Nate Diaz. Diaz does have a lot of like opening and weaknesses, but like he's not a guy he's like not a guy that just goes away.
You have to put him away if you can.
When was he actually knocked out before?
Josh Thompson.
Okay.
Which was several years ago. Thompson did a lot of circling, a lot of very effective clinch breaking, and it took like 2 or 3 full-on head kicks to knock him out. But I think that's the only time he's been finished via strikes.
How many years ago was that?
Oh, geez. That was in 2013.
Like Benson Henderson, like decisively beat Diaz and gave him everything he had, and
that was not a close fight numerically.
No, but Diaz never went away in that fight.
Yeah, the 50-43 score for Benson Henderson was more accurate than 50-45.
I'm just trying to find the fight he lost, like when that was.
I mean, both Rory McDonald and Dong Yen Kim.
2013.
Yeah, I said that.
Quite a while. Like, I feel like he's not a guy who's just going to go away against Masvidal. And I don't see Masvidal connecting with that one solid shot to just drop him. You know? And I think in terms of their boxing, I think I might put Diaz probably above Masvidal in terms of just actual boxing and striking skill in kickboxing. Diaz is also very good off of his back. That's another thing. And he's a very underrated grappler. He knows how to grapple.
If these two actually go to the mat, that will be extremely interesting for me. Because, again, Diaz is a great jiu-jitsu practitioner. And Masvidal's wrestling and jiu-jitsu acumen gets slept on a lot.
Now, if Masvidal wants to beat Diaz, the blueprint's there. Like, Diaz is not... I don't want to say he's a hard guy to beat, but he's not unbeatable. I mean, his record proves it.
He occupies this weird space where, again, like you said, the blueprint is kind of there. It's just really hard to do.
But it's possible, and I mean, he's lost 11 times. So he has 9 losses inside the UFC. To me, that's not the greatest record. You know?
I mean, he's still got less losses in the UFC than BJ Penn.
Right. Well,
sorry, I couldn't help myself.
It just makes me angry. It doesn't even make me laugh. Yeah, I just think Diaz is going to take Masvidal out of his comfort zone. He's going to make it a long, drawn-out brawl. And I think if that happens, it's going to favor Diaz.
I think the sloppier this gets, the more it favors Diaz, absolutely.
I would agree with that. I don't think... I'm not, like, emphatically for Diaz winning. Like, I can see Masvidal winning this. But if it's going to be a long, sloppy brawl, I favor Diaz.
Yeah, again, for me, part of the interest is what happens the longer this fight goes, because both guys have proven multiple times they can fight for 5 rounds. And the longer this goes, the longer it stays technical, the more it favors Masvidal. But again, the sloppier it gets, the more I tend to think Diaz keeps coming on strong. So, again, great fight. Really looking forward to it. Also on this card, I'm looking forward to the co-main event, Darren Till moving up to middleweight to challenge another former welterweight, Kelvin Gastelum. Um, I'm picking Kelvin Gastelum. I don't know what else to say. Like, Gastelum went life and death in a hell of a fight with the best middleweight in the world, and has only lost twice at middleweight, once to Weidman, once to Adesanya. He's beaten some really talented guys. And Darren Till at middleweight is an interesting... It's where I want him to fight. I think he tended to kind of fall in love with the notion that he was a very powerful striker. And while he does have...
crazy matchup for him for his first middleweight fight.
This is a big ask for him. Because I think Darren Till's biggest advantage at welterweight even was not his power, but his speed. He had very fast hands. And the ability to kind of spring into distance, land something you didn't see coming, and then retreat to avoid counters, just caught a lot of people off guard. And you couple that with the fact that, again, I'm not saying he has bad power. He has very good power. But the notion that, again, like, if you see his punches coming, can adequately prepare for them, they're not nearly as damaging. At middleweight, he's going to be trying to exacerbate his speed advantage more often than not. Unfortunately, he's fighting a guy who, prior to fighting Adesanya, like, wasn't knocked down, has a really... Gastelum's chin is incredible. Gastelum has incredible hand speed of his own. Gastelum's a little bit hard to hit. Like, he made Adesanya miss a lot. And he's got good head movement. Thudding power of his own. Good wrestling if he chooses to use it. This is a real tall order for Darren Till. If Darren Till's going to win, it's going to be because he catches him early, I think. Which is not outside the realm of possibility. But I'm picking Gastelum. And I am also looking forward to this. There's only one fight on this main card I am not looking forward to. So I'm leaning towards Gastelum. Really good fight. I hope Till sticks around at middleweight, win, lose, or draw after this bout.
Gastelum. Till is one of the most overhyped fighters in history. He was out of his depth against Tyron Woodley. He shouldn't have been in that fight. I don't think he's in this fight for his first fight at middleweight.
Yeah, it's a big one. In fairness, I thought Till lost the Stephen Thompson fight.
Let me just say this. Luke Thomas once called it promotional malpractice when Gastelum was booked against Weidman, which I thought was ridiculous. I'm going to steal a Luke Thomas line and call it promotional malpractice that Till is being booked in this fight. But apparently this is a fight that Till wanted. So it's partially on him, too. So there you go.
Careful. It's actually Vox Media that owns the rights to promotional malpractice now.
The term?
Yeah. Well, no. Like, the term as a marketing tool. Like, that. I
just think it's a bad idea putting him in a fight like this for his first fight, for his first test at middleweight.
Yeah. Again,
look, don't get me. I hesitate. There's always going to be a risk, no matter who you fight. And I'm not saying fighters will lose fights they should win all the time.
We were just talking about Michael Johnson not too long ago.
Exactly. So I just think it's weird for this to be his first fight at middleweight.
If I were Darren Till's manager, this would not have been the fight I picked for him to debut at middleweight.
But apparently he wanted a fight like this. So,
and you know what? If he was, sold on the idea of fighting Kelvin Gastelum, you know what? You can't talk him out of it. Some guys can't get out of their own way.
It's a roll of this fight is a roll of the dice, because if he somehow comes out of this with a win,
especially if he does something, if he stops Kelvin Gastelum,
right? And as a fighter, you have to be confident in your skill and believe you can come out on top. I understand that. I'm just where Till is right now. This matchup, I'm not. I just don't see how he beats Gastelum.
If I had my brothers, I would have put him in there with someone like Brad Tavares or Krzysztof Jotko.
Honestly, Robert, I see this fight going a lot like the Woodley fight. personally.
I don't think Gastelum will do the takedown threat as quickly as
Gastelum's
Woodley
a good
did.
wrestler.
He is. I just don't think that's going to be his game plan. I might be wrong. But I mean, my favorite thing about that fight between Till and Woodley was the fact that Woodley came out and the first thing he did was get right in Till's face and punch him really hard and just threw him off his game.
Look what he did to Uriah Hall. Darren Till could very well be the next Uriah Hall, Robert.
You know, that's not a bad fight, actually, now that you bring it up. Let Darren Till fight Uriah Hall.
I think that would have made a lot more sense for Till. For his crack.
Someone like Hall or like Brad Tavares, maybe. You know? Like that's what...
Not Brad Tavares.
Why not?
Just because, you know...
Look, I don't like watching Brad Tavares fight.
You need to give Till a more exciting crack at middleweight.
Okay, you want to give him a more fan-friendly fight, okay.
Yes, I mean, just because...
fair enough.
It's Brad Tavares.
Okay, then go further down in the rankings. Go with Krzysztof Jotko, who's more of a striker. But also, you know, rather pedestrian in many respects.
But I mean, does he even beat a Krzysztof Jotko?
I think there's less risk in the Jotko fight.
Arguably. But we'll see.
Again, it's a great fight as far as the action itself. I'm looking forward to it.
Once upon a time, I wasn't totally sold on Robert Whittaker moving up. And him mounting. But sometimes you got to take... I mean, so it's not necessarily wrong for Till to take risks like this, but it just seems like a bad risk. But we'll see.
All right. Next, back at welterweight, Stephen Thompson and Vicente Luque are going to fight.
This is a great fight.
A really good fight.
This fight is really getting overlooked too.
On any other fight card, this would probably be more like a co-main event. It's that good a fight. Luque on a long winning streak, 5-6. I think 6.
He's doing great.
Coming off that win over Mike Perry. Stephen Thompson, unfortunately, coming off of that loss to Anthony Pettis.
He is 10-2 in the UFC.
Yeah, Luque is perpetually underappreciated.
Is he even ranked in the top 10?
Yeah, he's 14, I think. Yeah, 14.
That's shouldn't he be higher?
Yes.
The
fact that he is ranked right now below Ben Askren, Anthony Pettis, Robbie Lawler, and Darren Till is ridiculous.
He should be, honestly, I think he should be number 9 right now.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that? If I were to say...
I wouldn't complain about that. Maybe even higher.
Just to me, it's not just opponents. Look, 10-2 at welterweight is impressive because that is a stacked division.
Yeah, welterweight's a really good division.
This fight, man.
Yeah, this is a tough one.
I don't know.
I'm torn a little bit on this one because Luque's a darn good fighter. He's got power. He's a little bit rangy. He's a little on the rugged side.
Thompson's kind of on, I don't want to say he's on a downswing.
He's not had the best. His recent stretch is not great. Long way to say that. I can see either man winning. I mean, again, if Thompson's able to keep this long and technical.
Would you agree that the Till fight was debatable who won?
I scored it for Thompson.
Yeah, so... See, 2 years ago, I would have picked Thompson.
Yeah. I mean, I also thought Thompson got a raw deal on, like, one of the scorecards for one of the Woodley fights. I can't remember which one.
The first one. It was probably the first one.
I think it was the second, actually. The second one was just this weird situation where...
Nothing happened.
Well, here's my thing about that. And I might have to... If I were to rewatch that fight, I might put more 10-10 rounds in. But I'm not sure about that. But I just thought that based on how I saw the rounds going, I thought he might have won the second fight. That said, I think over the two fights with Woodley's the better fighter.
I'm going out on a limb here. I'm picking Luque. but I love this matchup. I hope it's a good fight.
I think I'm picking Luque too, man. And he's a really good, really underappreciated fighter.
He's surging.
And I mean,
he's arguably a young up and coming contender.
He is. I mean, and Stephen Thompson looked good in the Anthony Pettis fight. He just kind of got caught with that Superman punch.
And his only loss in 10 fights in his last 11 fights, excuse me. His only loss in 11 fights is to Leon Edwards, who's right up there right now. So
Edwards is what, number 4?
Let's see.
And I've got those open on a tab. Yeah, number 4.
Yeah, he's 4. And honestly, right now, I don't mind Edwards being 4.
Nah, that's perfectly fair.
So I would say Luque should probably be higher just because based on the fact 6 in a row, 10-2 overall, the UFC, that's pretty damn good.
He should be higher, welterweight.
Okay.
Welterweight's a bit of a mess.
I think it's an interesting matchup. And Thompson is very highly skilled. And Thompson has adopted his game very well to MMA. That's another thing.
Yeah, he really has. There's a lot that he does technically that I think is going to be studied in the future and refined and made better by other people. Like
Thompson has, in terms of grappling, he has fairly good takedown defense.
Very good, yeah.
So, I mean, his transition to MMA, considering, his karate background, he did quite well for himself. Yeah, but edging toward Luque, but very interesting fight, and I'm very torn on it as well.
All right, next up, oh god, heavyweight. Derek Lewis is fighting Blagoy Ivanov. I don't care. Probably Derek Lewis because Blagoy Ivanov is such a non-entity by and large. Yeah, I'm going with Lewis.
Here's what's going to happen. Derek Lewis he's going to lose the first 2 rounds and then
badly.
And then he's going to survive and come back with a knockout in the last 10 seconds of the third because it's Derek Lewis.
Yeah, he's going to lose the first 2 rounds badly. Then Ivanov's going to gas, and Derek Lewis is going to kind of push him over, do the finger poke of doom, and that'll be it.
Because that happens in an alarming amount of Derek Lewis fights.
Yep.
He's got a lot of late, Volkov.
That performance by Volkov in that fight still just angers me.
Volkov, Tybura was in the 3rd round.
Shamil Abdurakhimov was in the 4th, I think.
4th, yeah. I mean, he didn't finish Nelson, but it was kind of like the same story with Nelson, right?
Yeah.
And I
also kind of think Nelson won that fight.
And Victor Pesta. So, yeah. Derek Lewis, my balls was hot.
All right, and kicking off the main card, this fight. Ooh, baby. Kevin Lee returning to lightweight to fight Gregor Gillespie.
This is a great fight, too.
This is a great fight. Gregor Gillespie, undefeated.
Kevin Lee returning to lightweight, though.
Yeah. Just I don't know.
Hopefully he can make lightweight after fighting welterweight for a spell.
Yeah, Gillespie again undefeated, 5-0 in the UFC. All of them finishes. Jeez. Nope, sorry. All but one of them finishes. Oh, so he's 6-0. That I don't know why.
Gillespie he's getting. I think he should be getting a lot more attention right now.
Oh yeah.
He's been outstanding so far.
Yeah, again, this is a great fight.
Gillespie.
Yeah, I'm leaning Gillespie. I mean, they're both great wrestlers. A lot of this is going to be dictated by who secures a position of control first. Because Lee's an exceptional back taker.
I think Lee, he's not a slow starter. He tends to start very well, right?
Yeah. His whole thing tends to be, I just dive at you in the opening seconds.
Mm-hmm.
I'm leaning Gillespie, but that's a great fight. Really looking forward to that one.
Sorry, Kevin Lee. I like you, but I think you're not going to take this one.
It's a rough matchup, man.
It just is. Hard, honestly. Just in terms of matchups, skill level, records, and everything, this This is probably one of the better main cards we've seen in a while, I think, just in terms of balance.
Take away that heavyweight fight, and that's the best main card the UFC's had on pay-per-view, like, all year.
I'd probably agree.
All right, as for the prelims, Corey Anderson, who I forget exists all the time. I have to say, I laughed so hard.
Or Johnny Walker. He's going to lose.
I can't pick Corey Anderson. I mean, oh, God.
It's surging Corey Anderson.
Corey Anderson, like, oh, man. Like, I laughed so hard because I wound up watching part of one of the hype pieces they did yesterday for this event. They had an interview with Corey. It was like, no, you can hit me all day and I'm not going to go away. Like, buddy, I can think of at least 3 times you got knocked out. I'm the most consistent fighter in the division. The only thing you're consistent about is being forgettable. I know Corey Anderson is on a 3-fight winning streak. I know I watched every one of those fights. I could not tell you anything about any of them. Not one thing. I'm picking Johnny Walker, not just because Corey Anderson is just like has kind of taken over the position of Ryan Bader in the division, but somebody has to break up the malaise at light heavyweight. And I'm just kind of hoping Johnny Walker is one of the guys to do it. I mean, Corey Anderson stumbles in the big fights anyway. Again, he wins the Ultimate Fighter, beats a nobody, steps up to John Vellante, gets finished, wins 3 in a row, fights Shogun, loses. Okay, kind of a bad decision, but loses. Rebounds, fights Jimmy Manoa, knocked out. Fights Ovince St. Preux, gets knocked out in the 3rd round. Like, I don't know. I don't think he's going to be that guy. Maybe I'm wrong. I have been in the past. I will be in the future. But, I mean, even if he wins this fight, he could win this fight, immediately, call out John Jones, and in 3 days, everyone will forget the fight happened. Shane Burgos will fight Makwan Amirkhani. This is a good fight, actually. Burgos on a 2-fight winning streak. He's only lost once. He's like, 5-1 in the UFC. And Amirkhani had some hype at one point, and that just kind of died. Inactivity is a not very good thing. He's coming off a win over Chris Fishgold. Going with Burgos. At middleweight, Brad Tavares will fight Edmund Shabazian. Brad Tavares exists. He hasn't fought since the Adesanya fight in July of last year. He's taking this fight on short notice. Okay, this was supposed to be Ian Heinisch and Shabazian. Shabazian undefeated. 3 wins in the UFC. This is a pretty stiff test for Shabazian, but I think he'll win. We have another heavyweight fight, Andrei Arlovsky, who won his last fight. Andrei Arlovsky at this point in time does this thing where he loses a bunch of fights, then wins a fight, then loses a bunch of fights, then wins a fight. He beat Ben Rothwell in his last fight. He's fighting Jairzinho Rosenstruik, who is he undefeated? If he's not, he's close to it. Who's got like 2? Does he have 2 or 3 wins? I have to look this up now. Because I believe he's fought twice in the UFC and has knocked out both of his opponents. There he is. Yeah, he's undefeated. He's 8-0. Fought twice in the UFC. Knocked out both of them. I can't pick Andrei Arlovsky to win a fight. I just can't do it. Then our early prelims. Jennifer Maia will fight Caitlin Chookagian. Boy, that's going to suck. Probably Chookagian wins another ultimately uninspiring decision and then backs into a title shot by virtue of just, hey, I'm ranked. Look at me, look at me, look at me. And the UFC goes, sure, we need someone to fight Valentina. And Valentina proceeds to watch her shadow box in front of her for 3.5 rounds before kicking her in the head. Lyman Good will fight Chance Rencounter. That's not a bad fight, actually. good. Lost to Damian Maia's last time out. Rough setback for him. He ended a long layoff kind of deal and knocked out Ben Saunders. Ended a really long layoff when he dropped a tough decision to Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos. And Chance Rencounter's not a... Yeah, he's only lost once in the UFC. That was to Bilal Muhammad. He won his last 2 fights. He's kind of a wet blanket, but like the aggressive kind of wet blanket. I'm actually going to lean towards good there, but that's a winnable fight for Rencounter. And kicking everything off, Julio Arce will fight Hakeem Dawodu. Arce, good overall UFC record, only lost the 1 time. Kind of surprised they're giving Dawodu someone who's good. They've been giving him kind of cans. I mean, he debuted in the UFC and got submitted by Danny Henry. Then they gave him, low-level fighters to kind of get him back on track. I'm going to pick Arce there, but if Dawodu's actually found his stride, this is his chance to really prove it. Okay, Jeff, again, there's some good fights there. This is not a bad undercard. What are you looking forward to?
Let's see here. I mean, Corey Anderson versus Johnny Walker, of course. How can you not love that fight?
I've seen too many Corey Anderson fights.
I think Burgos versus Amir Khan is a good matchup for featherweight. Let's see, Chookagian versus Maia. That looks like it'll be a decent fight, at least.
All right. Again, Saturday we'll have coverage of that in the MMA Zone of 411mania.com. Stop by, say hello, enjoy the fights. Always appreciated. Okay, let's move on to some of the news. Let's start with this. UFC 245 got 2 more fights added to it over the last week. They're both great fights in different ways, but former featherweight champion Jose Aldo, moving down to bantamweight, will fight Marlon Moraes, former title challenger. I'm somewhat wary of Aldo at bantamweight. Featherweight at times was a very hard cut for him to make. And it's always just a little bit kind of iffy when you see a former great, and make no mistake, Jose Aldo, great fighter, but out of the title picture between the 2 losses to Max Holloway and then the loss to Volkanovski, trying to move down in weight to kind of reinvent himself. Again, that's, at this point in MMA, it just doesn't have the best track record. And Marlon Moraes is not an easy fight, but it's a good fight. I'm looking forward to it in kind of a abstract sense, but I don't know. Again, Aldo at bantamweight's kind of leery. Also at bantamweight, Petr Yan is going to fight Uriah Faber, and I fully expect him to just murder him. Look, Faber came back and fought a top 15 guy that was kind of the only guy ranked in that division he could reasonably be expected to beat. Petr Yan, by contrast, is going to try to kill him. I'm not going to pick Faber. Not over Yan. Yan's just good. I mean, Ricky Simone had moderate success against Faber, and Simone is a profoundly flawed fighter. Not that Jan's perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but if Jan's going to make a case for himself they're also wasting time at bantamweight because Henry Cejudo is just not going to defend that belt. But we can't actually say that or do anything about it. So, hey, former title challenger Marlon Moraes will now fight Aldo, and should be challenger or in a title eliminator fighter Petr Yan will fight the California middle-aged man.
Wait. Can...
Go ahead.
Aldo versus Moraes?
Yeah.
So is Moraes moving up?
Nope.
So Aldo's moving down.
Yep.
Sorry, Jose Aldo.
I mean, again, I'm looking forward to the fight because both those guys can fight their backsides off.
Can Aldo safely make 135?
I have no idea. He seems
When
confident.
Aldo was talking about fighting at 135, that was when Miguel Torres was champion. So like,
God, he would have killed Torres.
We're talking like an MMA century ago, Robert.
Yeah, again for the longest time, the talk about Aldo has been him moving up to lightweight.
Faber is going to get eaten alive by Peter Yan.
Yeah, I don't see that ending well for him.
If you're Faber, why do you even accept a fight with Peter Yan?
I think there might be something in play where if he beats Yan, he can leapfrog everyone else for a title fight.
I mean, I guess, but I mean, do you think he beats Peter Yan?
No. I think Peter Yan might actually kill him in the cage.
I mean, I won't go that far, but damn. Yeah.
Look, Peter Yan doesn't play around like that. He's one of those guys who I watch him fight and I kind of go, you might kill someone and it probably wouldn't faze you at all.
Peter Yan is very underrated.
Yeah, I've been a fan of that guy dating back to some of his ACB fights. I've loved him in the UFC. He's not ranked high enough right now.
Stone cold thriller killer.
That man, his nickname isn't the Siberian Gangster for nothing. Like, that guy will end you.
Here's something else. Sergio Pettis is going to Bellator.
Yeah, I did see that, and I don't care.
Seems to make sense, honestly.
Look, he
hit his ceiling in the UFC.
He did, and he never kind of just found his footing in the UFC, and look, guys, remember how they talked about how they were going to keep flyweight around? Look, there's a legitimate flyweight contender and longtime member of the division going away, like all the others.
Well,
they're not saving the division.
I contest legitimate contender.
Okay, well, maybe not title contender, but a solid upper level gatekeeper, if nothing else.
Yeah. I think this is for the best for him. I think this is a good. I think it's a good move for his career.
I mean, if he can get paid more and he's happy, Godspeed and party on, man. Go get paid, go have fun.
I mean, it might be the matchups might even be better for him in Bellator,
I assume he'd be fighting at bantamweight. I don't think Bellator has a flyweight division.
Well, even at bantamweight, it might be better matchups, don't you think?
Yeah, and him potentially fighting Kyoji Horiguchi. If he fights Kyoji Horiguchi, for example, I mean, Horiguchi would finish him, but not a bad fight.
Sure.
So no, I mean, again, I don't have any ill will towards Sergio Pettis, which is odd considering how many of his fights I've watched.
Conor McGregor is apparently going to fight in January. We don't know.
Conor McGregor's full of crap.
Speaking of, so you don't think that fight happens in January?
No.
Okay.
Look, I'll believe it when there's signed bout agreements and.
Okay.
Like, I'm not saying it's impossible. I will not take his word for it, absent other evidence.
Here's what did happen with McGregor. He was at some sort of press
thrown at him.
Some sort of press event at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Moscow. An angry fan who shouted at McGregor launched a soda bottle, which did not hit McGregor. He ducked. It remember George W. Bush in the shoe?
I do.
Conference? It's kind of like that, basically. Nothing connected, but it was thrown, and
it's almost like he very publicly and for a prolonged period of time insulted an entire group of people in a region of the world. And those people took him seriously.
In the video, even.
Yeah, I mean, look, I have no interest in Conor McGregor until he gets in the cage. Until then, I don't care. I don't care at all.
The video was kind of funny, though.
Sure. Like, again, in kind of the memey sense, I don't object to that.
Sure.
He
Yeah.
says it. Oh, sure. I'm going to fight in January. You got an opponent? No. You got an actual date in the card? No. You got a geographical location you're going to fight in? Got an opponent? No. Shut up. You're just desperately trying to hang on to relevancy as the sport moves on without you. Hey, please pay no attention to the multiple allegations of sexual misconduct thrown my way. I'm going to fight again.
It's weird how like no one's almost no one's like, we get news about that, but no one's getting all outraged about that. It's surprising.
Well, part of that is it's not been confirmed in the same way that American media is used to confirming things because of Irish laws. The other part of it is,
I mean, but look at court of public opinion will destroy people here.
It will.
On allegations alone.
Relative to what you're doing, like who you are kind of matters with that, I think.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we don't really want, and this might be a little bit odd, but we don't really want, for some reason, you know, directors to take advantage, and I'll put air quotes around that because there's a lot of people who do it willingly, of people, you know, trying to break into Hollywood kind of thing.
That's fair.
And then at the same time, we profoundly ignore the debauchery and that NFL players get up to, or basketball players, on just the norm. I remember there was that like pseudo outrage for about a week and a half over the Vikings party boat.
That I don't remember. I mean, there was considerable outrage over Ray Rice, and just recently with the Houston Astros, their assistant GM just got fired over comments about Osuna, the pitcher.
Yeah, he said some stupid things.
Yeah. But the Astros did really fumble that badly at first.
Yeah. And I think there's just enough of a history of.
There is. I think it is prevalent in pro sports. I have to disagree with you there.
Oh no!
From what I've seen, it does.
When was the last large scale like genuine outrage over the behavior of a sports figure?
To me, I mean that I really remember, it was probably Ray Rice.
Okay.
Huge.
Okay, that's fair. But remember when Ray Lewis killed a guy?
No, actually, no, I don't. I don't follow pro sports enough. But like
this was years ago.
The Ray Rice thing was national news. You know.
I think if I set aside, you know, Colin Kaepernick and all that stuff, so setting that aside, I think the last time I can kind of remember something was who was that running back who like beat his kid? Wasn't there a running back for the Vikings who like was striking his kid with a switch?
I vaguely remember something like that.
I can't remember his name for the life of me right now.
I remember some stuff about that some years back.
Yeah, I think that's a few years ago. But it's
when did Ray Lewis actually happen?
Oh, like the year before the Ravens won the Super Bowl, I think. So we're talking like 10 plus years.
Okay. Ray Rice was more recent though.
Yeah. But again, like, that stuff happens all the time, and for some reason it doesn't seem to gain the same kind of traction.
Okay.
And it happens even less, and it happens less.
I think subject matter happens, but I do remember there was a time where people were like, and people were surprised when NFL players weren't getting into trouble, basically. When there was like an NFL player who like kept his nose clean. Was sort of, and this is like back in the aughts, as I recall.
Well, you know, Steve Young was kind of an aberration in that respect.
People it was, the perception was so bad that people basically accepted NFL players to be like small-time criminals, basically.
Yep.
Routine.
But again, it's to the point where it happens so frequently we're somewhat inured to it in many respects. And it's worse in combat sports because there's just such a long history of...
Yeah, I can get that. I'm just surprised with the subject matter now that McGregor seems to largely escape it.
I think the first time that he is named publicly, the same way that in the way that, if that same thing were happening to an American fighter on American soil,
Right.
of roughly his stature, and this is just again kind of a law and culture thing. The press in the United States and the press in Ireland operate under different laws.
Okay.
And look, the first time he's arrested, it's all assuming there's enough evidence to warrant that.
Okay, but so far he has not been formally charged or arrested relating to these incidents so far.
At the moment, they are just allegations, and he is being investigated. That's all we know.
All right, but this thing with the soda bottle was still amusing.
Shame the guy missed.
Look,
I said the same thing about Verdum missing Colby Covington with the boomerang, just because it would have been funny.
Tyson Fury told Sky Sports he's going to train for his MMA debut. Would you like to comment?
I don't dislike Tyson Fury as a fighter, but I have no interest in him in the MMA space. I think he's probably saying that to garner attention more than anything else.
Yeah, I probably agree with that.
Okay. Hang on. The UFC's upcoming Moscow card got a shake-up. The original main event of Alexander Volkov versus Junior Dos Santos is off. Junior Dos Santos has a gnarly staph infection.
Oh, that looks awful.
Yeah, he posted a picture of himself in the hospital, and you can see the hole in his leg.
I hope his leg is going to be okay.
Well, he's in a hospital. That's the best case scenario. So, assuming it's a good hospital, and I believe he lives in the United States. So, while not a guarantee, certainly does increase his odds. Stepping in to replace him against Volkov is Greg Hardy. He of now Inhaler Gate and illegal knees. That will not be the main event. That will now be the co-main event. Your new main event was already on the card. It's a featherweight fight between Zabit Magomedsharipov and Calvin Kattar. However, it's only going to be a 3-round fight because of the short notice change on the card.
I mean, that's a good fight, by the way. I don't know.
It's not a bad fight at all.
But speaking of good hospitals, I'm not trying to, just to preface this, I'm not trying to bash Chile, but Volkanovski said he received very good treatment for his staph infection when he went to Chile. Said it was like the best hospital in Chile.
I think he disembarked in Santiago, and that's where he had that. So it might have been. And I mean, I know Chile's had some protests recently, which, I mean, fair enough. It's not a perfect country, but if he got good care, and he's gonna fight for the belt again soon. So But at one point, he was worried his leg would have to be amputated, but he said he was at a good hospital and he received very good treatment. So just to kind of dispel the myth that South American there's the notion that South America is populated with third world countries is deeply inaccurate.
Right. So I mean, this might it might be rare, Volkanovski's experience, but apparently he received very good treatment at a very good hospital there. So go figure.
Yeah, and good on him. I mean, if I'm him and I wind up in I
mean, that was from what he described, it was a very scary situation for him.
Yeah, it got there. based on his account.
I'm glad to disbelieve him. Credit to the doctors for taking good care of him there.
Yeah, so hopefully Junior heals up. This will also apparently adversely affect his participation in Brazil's Dancing with the Stars. I think he's still in the show. I'm not sure. I know he was on a couple of weeks ago because he was posting stuff about it, and the video of his performance is online. But yeah, managed to go, years without a major staph infection, rolling on the mats in, ATT or the Nogueira Brothers gym, and suddenly goes on Dancing with the Stars, less sanitary. I joke. I can't vouch for the conditions in the dance studio that he's trained at. So yeah, anyway, UFC Moscow got shaken up, and it's still an okay card-ish.
I mean, it's an ESPN Plus Moscow card.
I mean, again, it lost the best fight on the card by far, but
even that, I got to be honest, even that fight I wasn't too excited about.
I mean, again, it's not a great fight, but it's a relevant heavyweight fight between two heavyweights who are actually good fighters. I'll take that any day of the week.
Yeah.
I think that's everything I've got. So anything else?
Jake Hager had his last fight overturned due to illegal knees to the groin. So he's now 2-0 and 1 no contest. Sorry, Jake Hager.
He should have been DQ'd.
Do you think those? So you think those knees were intentional?
I think if you foul somebody twice in the same way, resulting in the stoppage of a fight due to the other guy being unable to continue, I'm happy to give someone the benefit. I'm happy to let it be circumstantial the first time. If it happens a second time, I think that just your repeated negligence should be punished.
50...
I mean, he was kind of getting abused in that fight anyway. Also relative to Bellator, congrats to Douglas Lima, who beat Rory McDonald yesterday to win their welterweight Grand Prix, win the welterweight title, and win the $1 million prize. So, Douglas Lima.
He actually going to keep that?
I don't know. Look, Douglas Lima, criminally underrated welterweight, one of the better welterweights in the world.
Yeah.
Again, just dude's only lost to 3 people, and he's avenged 2 of those. He's only lost to Ben Askren, Rory McDonald, and Andrei Koreshkov.
The UFC should get him.
I mean, I think they've tried on occasion. I don't know. But again, Douglas Lima, great fighter. Sadly underappreciated. Good for him. Minor anti-kudos within that same vein to Roy Nelson and Frank Mir, who had a rematch on Bellator. That fight was worse than their first one, and their first one sucked.
Okay, here. Randy Couture, 56 years old, UFC Hall of Famer, former champion. Apparently had a heart attack a few days ago. He's apparently doing okay and was able to walk out of the hospital on his own.
He walked into the he didn't even realize he was having a heart attack.
Right.
Had a workout.
So he thought he pulled something while he was working out. He didn't realize it was a heart attack.
Walked himself into the hospital in the midst of a heart attack. The absolute badass.
So it seems like he's okay. He's glad to hear he's doing okay. And
he's left the hospital.
That's a his story.
In his own words, he has not yet kicked the bucket.
So get well soon, Randy Couture, and hope he doesn't have any long-term heart issues. So hope he's doing okay there.
Ditto.
Randy is a living legend. Luke Rockhold said he's not interested in another MMA bout. Speaking to ESPN, so it seems like he's on.
We talked a little bit about that last week. Yeah, that he might just be done at this point, and I don't blame him.
Good decision for him at this point. I mean, he's getting some good modeling gigs, like some prime gigs, and I feel like he's hit the ceiling for MMA. I kind of feel like he's kind of hit the wall.
Yeah, it's entirely possible.
Career, all things considered, he's had a very good career.
Agreed.
Tito Ortiz tells MMA Fighting that he's not leaving anytime soon, and he's going to make another run for the Bellator light heavyweight belt after he fights Alberto Del Rio, a.k.a. Alberto El Patron.
Yeah, that fight has about as much chance of being legitimate as that old fight between Ken Shamrock and Matt Hume.
So that fight's happening in December, and after that, Tito Ortiz is not going away.
Despite our repeated requests that he do so.
Hey, you know what? More power to him. Tito, live the best life, Tito.
Yeah, you engage in whatever you're gonna do.
Tito has no obligation to listen to what I have to say. He's his own man.
Look, the rematch between Tito Ortiz and Ryan Bader. Remember when he submitted Bader with a guillotine choke?
Right. Yeah, I remember.
Oh god, that was hilarious.
That's what would have ended his career, really.
Oh god. Yeah, now Bader's a dual. If he beats Bader again, like I would love for him to just jump guillotine the first time they lock up.
That'd be funny.
Oh, God.
Yeah, so we should keep fighting.
Ortiz and Bader, just why?
Keep fighting, Tito.
Look, man, I'm not your father or anything. Just whatever he's gonna do.
That's all I have. That's all I have for MMA news.
Yeah. Let me refresh Twitter very quickly, see if anything crazy happened over the last 20 or so minutes. I don't think anything new.
Ronda Rousey showed support for Diaz. Good for her.
Yeah. Look, Ronda deciding to bash PED users while being part of the WWE might be the least self-aware thing she's ever done.
Well,
and that covers a lot of ground.
She's always been friendly with the Diaz's, as I recall.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but I feel like she's trained with them in the past, or
something like that.
I feel look, she's been friendly with them for a long time, as I recall.
I'm just saying, when you're in professional wrestling, if your stance is people who use steroids are insert expletive, you might want to consider the company you're keeping. All right, moving on to plugs. So, what do we got this week?
Okay, so for movies, I'll be reviewing. Oh, I just reviewed One Piece Stampede. So if we have any anime fans, this is the new One Piece theatrical film. Having it's in the middle of a brief theatrical run in the U.S., so there's actually still time to see it in theaters right now. Enjoyed it. Check that out. Next reviews will be to Terminator Dark Fate. Yeah. The report, which we talked about a little bit earlier, which was about the U.S.'s enhanced interrogation program. I hear that Adam Driver is getting a lot of Oscar buzz for this film. It's a pretty interesting film. Didn't hate it. And then what else? Playing with Fire, starring John Cena. That should be the subject of your next podcast with Mark Rattles, right?
Absolutely not.
Why not?
Look, I lived through Super Cena. Okay, I lived through LOL Cena wins. I was a wrestling fan during that period of time when Cena, in consecutive feuds, basically buried Chris Jericho, and Kurt Angle.
Mm-hmm.
I spent all of that time not wanting to kick John Cena in the dick. Then I saw a trailer for Playing with Fire.
It looks like it's going to be the greatest movie of the year, right?
I want to drown everyone involved in that movie in a bucket of piss.
Okay, well, that's very dark. That's very dark. I'm not expecting an Oscar winner, but I am going to see him review that movie for 411 Mania, so look forward.
I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
Mark and I both saw trailers for that ahead of Maleficent. It was the first time I'd seen a trailer for it.
Yeah.
I wanted to die while just watching the trailer. Just no, get me the hell out of here. Mark then said, yeah, my one of his kids wants to see it now, and he just said, I'm a good dad, so I'll do it with them. But even Mark has no interest in that.
Dad, if you take your kids to see Playing with Fire.
I don't know. I've tried on occasion to kind of get him around to showing them good movies.
Like Frozen 2, yes, you're a good dad. Playing with Fire, I'm not so sure. I'm sorry, Mark. I thought you guys were pretty on point for Mistress of Evil, though.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Which was a bad movie. Just that's the first one was bad to me, but quit while you're ahead, you know?
You know, if Hollywood knew how to quit while they were ahead, we wouldn't have franchise fatigue the way we do.
Mm-hmm. Now they're talking about the sequel for the Joker, and I'm like, please don't. Please.
Oh, there's no sequel there. Stop it.
They're gonna do it because that's what they do, you know, right?
I mean, it's only the highest grossing R-rated movie of all time. Why wouldn't they?
But as you said, when you look at the movie, there's really no sequel there, right?
Yeah, I don't want a sequel.
Well, it doesn't logically make any sense. So it's why? But whatever. So that's what's coming up, and I hope you do Playing with Fire for future.
Nope.
Damn you, Hollywood! I think it would be the best. I think it would be the best episode ever. of that show?
It would be my eulogy.
I'm going to pitch it to Mark Radulich.
That podcast, a review of that movie would be like a 2-hour suicide note from me to the world.
See, you see, if listening to you just talk about that is that good, I'm like, what would the actual show be? Now you're just selling me even more. I'm wanting to hear it.
I don't think anything good would come out of it. Like, we'd actually watch the movie, and Mark and I would just be so crushed within our souls that we just couldn't muster up the energy to talk about it.
But you know what? I actually kind of got interested realizing, hey, Tyler Mane is in the movie. Tyler Mane, formerly Sabretooth in the first X-Men film, and Mike Myers in the Rob Zombie Halloween reboot.
There is no one associated with that movie who I have any interest in on a cinematic level.
All right. But thank you, Robert. And yeah, that's what I got. Thank you, man.
Well, all right. As for myself, again, Jeff intimated it. Mark Radulich and I got together on Damn You Hollywood last week to review Maleficent, Mistress of Evil. More like Maleficent, title character has 5 lines of dialogue in a 2-hour-plus movie. Oh, God. Yet neither of us cared for it. But if you want details about what we had issues with, listen to the movie. We have a lot of fun. We talk about the money. We talk about how much the critics suck at their job. All the usual hits. This week we'll be reviewing Zombieland Double Tap on Tuesday on Damn You Hollywood. The week after will be Terminator Dark Fate. So look forward to those if you're fans of Damn You Hollywood over on the Radulich and Broadcasting Network.
What did you think of Double Tap, by the way?
I have not seen it yet. I will be seeing it Tuesday.
Interesting.
Tuesday's discount day at my theater chain here, so I try to save money. I'm cheap.
Did you like the first Zombieland, by the way?
I did.
Okay.
Not my favorite zombie comedy of all time. It's not Shaun of the Dead, but I enjoyed it.
Because I mean, I got to be like, I enjoyed the movie just purely as an entertaining zombie comedy, but a lot of the humor felt very dated to me, and I feel like, did they write this script 10 years ago and just wait 10 years to film it, kind of thing?
Probably. Like, that would not shock me if that were the sequence of events.
That was kind of like the vibe I got from that film, because I don't know.
Well, I imagine, again, from the trailers and whatnot, the comedy's either very dated or hyper modern. Like, it's either, relevant 10 years ago or boo
like
the president.
Like a Walking Dead joke in a zombie movie doesn't feel relevant in 2019. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's fair.
even like a joke, like there's this really long joke in the movie about ride sharing that felt kind of dated to me.
Yeah, again, I'll see the movie and I'll have a perspective once I see it. But
well, I'm looking forward to that. Thanks.
I will be sure to share it around on my social media accounts when it comes out. All right. Again, Saturday will be coverage of UFC 244 in the MMA Zone of 411 Mania, where you can find this podcast. Or you can find us on Apple Music, Google Play, Stitcher, Transistor. I think we're on iHeartRadio. Wherever you find podcasts, you can probably find us. So however you did, thank you very much. Please interact with the material a little bit. Be that a ratings, a thumbs. We're on YouTube as well. A rating, a thumbs up, a comment, a review, whatever it happens to be. If you think this is only like a 3-star show, only give me 3 stars. I only want what I earn. If you think less, fine, be less. I think I think we're better here than a 1-star show. That's my only caveat. If you disagree, fine, only go 1 star. So, again, always appreciate it if you guys will take the time to interact with the material a little bit. It helps us out tremendously. Feedback is always appreciated, if at all applicable. Thank you very much. We'll be back next week to review UFC 244, and we will be previewing. We will be previewing UFC Moscow, the Magomed Sharipov versus Calvin Kattar card on the 9th of November. That's when we'll be back next week.
Are we skipping next week?
No, that's what we're doing next week.
Okay.
Yeah, because next week will be the 3rd.
So we're recapping 244.
Yeah, and we'll preview the Moscow card, which is on the 9th.
So no more No more chaos for 244. Diaz, Masvidal. Dana,
maybe this. You mentioned Nate Diaz maybe pulling like the 500 IQ play. Maybe this was the real galaxy brain play here. Is Nate Diaz decided this is the only I'm going to manifest and deal with the chaos of this card all within a 48-hour time period, and now it'll be smooth sailing.
I mean, I hopefully it was enough to confuse Clucky or Cluckthulhu.
Look, if the MMA gods saw that chaos and were appeased, then I'll take it.
I'll take it too. Honestly.
Again, if the galaxy brain play here was cause a dust up over nothing, but the act of chaos itself is enough to dissuade any real damage to the card, I'll take it and be happy. I've been burned a lot, and I will take whatever I can get as far as that goes. But so anyway, Saturday, UFC 244. Next Sunday, we'll be back here reviewing that, previewing the UFC in Moscow card. We'll be back after Halloween, so I hope everyone stays safe out there. Have a good time. For those that celebrate Halloween, and if you don't, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. You are just one of those people. Until next time, everyone, again, stay safe out there. Thank you again for listening, and please continue to be well, be safe, and behave.